In today's fast-paced and chaotic world, it's easy to get caught up in a whirlwind of worries, desires, and negative emotions. But is there a way to find inner peace, not by escaping life, but by discovering its true meaning? Join us as we explore the wisdom of Buddhism, a timeless path of insight that has endured for thousands of years, helping us not only understand ourselves, but also teaching us how to face life's challenges with compassion and wisdom. This journey is more than just learning lessons. It's about discovering a way to experience tranquility in each moment of our lives. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by emotions, struggling to keep them in check? Whether it's anger, fear, anxiety, or sadness, these emotions often feel as if they have a life of their own, sweeping us along in a tide of reactions that we cannot control. The chaos that comes from not knowing how to deal with these emotions is something we all face at some point. But what if there was a way to master these emotions and, by doing so, transform the very challenges that life throws at us? This is where the wisdom of Buddhism steps in. Buddhism teaches us that the root of much of our suffering is not external circumstances, but our internal reactions to them. Our minds, constantly churning with thoughts and emotions, shape our perception of the world and, ultimately, our experiences. The Buddha himself, after his own profound awakening, shared insights into how we can break free from the cycle of suffering by understanding and mastering the mind. The Buddha's teachings on the nature of the mind are powerful and transformative. He taught that the mind is like a garden. If we cultivate it with mindfulness and compassion, it can flourish with peace, wisdom, and joy. But if we allow negative emotions and thoughts to run rampant, the mind becomes overrun with weeds of suffering. Just as a gardener tends to their garden, we must tend to our minds, carefully uprooting unwholesome thoughts and planting seeds of positivity and awareness. In this way, we take responsibility for our mental landscape, shaping not just how we respond to life's challenges, but how we experience life itself. This process is not easy. It requires patience, awareness, and practice. The Buddha's teachings on mindfulness and meditation provide a roadmap for cultivating emotional mastery. Meditation, in particular, is the tool that allows us to observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming swept away by them. It teaches us to notice when emotions arise, observe them without judgment, and let them pass without reacting. In this way, we begin to break the cycle of automatic emotional responses, replacing them with mindful choices. One of the most famous stories in Buddhist tradition that illustrates the power of emotional mastery is that of the Buddha's encounter with Mara, the tempter. Mara, embodying all the forces of distraction and delusion, attempted to disturb the Buddha's meditation by sending waves of temptation, fear, and doubt. Mara sent his daughters to seduce the Buddha, his armies to threaten him, and even caused an earthquake to shake the very ground beneath him. Yet, the Buddha remained calm and undisturbed. His emotional mastery allowed him to remain rooted in the present moment, unaffected by Mara's distractions. Ultimately, Mara's attempts were futile because the Buddha had developed the ability to see through the illusion of suffering and desire. The lesson here is clear. It is not the external forces that disturb us, but our internal reactions to them. Another powerful teaching comes from the story of the Buddha's encounter with a monk named Angulimala, a notorious killer who had been terrorizing the countryside. Despite his dark past, Angulimala sought the Buddha's guidance, hoping for redemption. As the story goes, when the Buddha saw Angulimala, he was not frightened or repelled by the monk's violent reputation. Instead, the Buddha saw a person who was suffering deeply from his own anger and ignorance. The Buddha did not react to Angulimala's past with judgment or fear. Instead, he spoke to him with compassion, helping Angulimala to see the destructive nature of his own mind. Through their interaction, Angulimala was able to abandon his murderous ways and transform his life. This story teaches us that emotional mastery is not about suppressing or denying our feelings, but about understanding them deeply and choosing not to be enslaved by them. The concept of emotional mastery in Buddhism also emphasizes forgiveness and letting go of attachment. The famous story of the Buddha's cousin, Devdatta, serves as another poignant example. Devdatta, who was once a close follower of the Buddha, eventually became envious of him and tried to kill him on several occasions. Despite these treacherous acts, the Buddha never allowed anger or hatred to take root in his heart. Instead, he responded with patience and wisdom, recognizing that Devdatta's actions were the result of his own ignorance. The Buddha's ability to forgive his cousin was not a passive act. It was an active expression of understanding the nature of suffering. By not reacting with anger, the Buddha showed us that true emotional mastery involves breaking free from the grip of revenge and bitterness. Emotional mastery also involves understanding the impermanence of all things, including our emotions. The Buddha's teachings on impermanence, anicca, remind us that no emotional state is permanent. Just as the clouds pass, so too do our emotions. If we learn to embrace the transient nature of feelings, we can let go of the need to cling to or push away emotions. This understanding allows us to experience emotions fully without being overwhelmed by them. We begin to see that emotions are not inherently good or bad, but natural phenomena that arise and pass away in the mind. When we learn not to identify with them, we gain freedom from their control. One of the most profound teachings on emotional mastery is found in the practice of loving-kindness, metta. In this practice, we cultivate love and compassion for ourselves and others. Loving-kindness is not an emotion we wait for. It is a mental attitude that we can actively develop through intention and practice. By regularly sending thoughts of goodwill to ourselves and others, we gradually shift our emotional landscape, replacing feelings of anger, resentment, and fear with love and compassion. This practice has the power to transform not only our relationships with others, but our relationship with ourselves. In this way, Buddhism offers a profound and practical framework for emotional mastery. It invites us to take a deep look at the inner workings of our minds and teaches us how to respond to life's challenges with awareness, compassion, and wisdom. By following the Buddha's teachings, we can learn to break free from the cycle of reactive emotions and instead cultivate a mind that is peaceful, balanced, and wise. As we delve deeper into the practice of emotional mastery in the following chapters, we will explore tools like meditation, mindfulness, and loving-kindness in more detail, offering practical insights and techniques to help you apply these teachings in your own life. But for now, let us reflect on the central message of this chapter. The mind is not something we are slaves to, but a powerful tool that we can train and shape. By mastering our emotions, we can not only transform our own lives, but also contribute to creating a more compassionate and peaceful world. Mindfulness is the cornerstone of Buddhist practice when it comes to managing emotions. It is a practice that goes beyond simply being aware of what is happening around us. It is a profound method of observing our internal world with clarity, patience, and kindness. The essence of mindfulness in Buddhism is the act of observing without judgment, a skill that allows us to see our emotions for what they truly are, temporary states of mind that arise and pass away. By cultivating this awareness, we can prevent ourselves from becoming entangled in our emotional responses, allowing us to handle difficult situations with calmness and wisdom. The Buddha often spoke of mindfulness as the path to ending suffering, emphasizing its transformative power in daily life. In the Satipatthana Sutta, one of the core teachings on mindfulness, the Buddha outlines how observing the body, feelings, mind, and mental objects allows us to see the true nature of reality. Through this practice, we learn that emotions are not solid or permanent. They arise due to certain conditions, and they dissipate when those conditions change. This understanding is essential for managing emotions because it gives us the perspective to see them as passing states rather than defining aspects of our identity. Consider a real-life scenario. Imagine you are in a stressful work meeting where a colleague openly criticizes your work in front of others. In such a moment, it's natural to feel a surge of defensive emotions, anger, embarrassment, or even resentment. Without mindfulness, we might react impulsively by snapping back or becoming defensive, which often leads to regret and further tension. However, if we practice mindfulness, we can pause before reacting. This pause is where transformation begins. Instead of immediately responding, we take a deep breath, anchoring our awareness in the present moment. By doing so, we can observe the emotions that arise within us without being swept away by them. We might notice, "I am feeling angry and embarrassed," without identifying with those feelings. This slight distance gives us the clarity to choose a response that is aligned with our values and the situation's needs, rather than one driven by temporary emotions. Another example of mindfulness in action could be navigating a difficult conversation with a loved one. Let's say a close family member says something hurtful or dismissive, perhaps unintentionally, but it strikes a nerve. Our initial reaction might be to argue or withdraw, responding to the pain we feel in that moment. With mindfulness, we pause and turn inward, noting the sensation of hurt without judgment. This allows us to see the emotion as a wave that rises and eventually falls away. By doing so, we gain the ability to respond from a place of understanding and compassion, rather than hurt or defensiveness. This simple act of observing, without immediately reacting, is a powerful practice that can transform our relationships and our inner peace. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh often described mindfulness as the energy that brings us back to ourselves, allowing us to understand and embrace our emotions without being overwhelmed by them. He emphasized the importance of coming home to our breath and body, creating a refuge within ourselves amidst life's storms. In his teachings, Thich Nhat Hanh would encourage practitioners to embrace your emotions as you would a crying child. Rather than suppressing or ignoring our difficult emotions, mindfulness invites us to gently acknowledge and care for them, allowing us to transform our pain with kindness and understanding. One famous story from the Buddhist tradition that highlights the power of mindfulness in handling emotions is the story of Kisa Gautami. Kisa was a woman who suffered deeply after the death of her young son. In her grief, she sought the Buddha, hoping he could bring her child back to life. The Buddha, understanding the intensity of her suffering, told her that he would help her, on the condition that she bring him a mustard seed from a household that had never experienced loss. Kisa went from house to house, but every family she encountered had faced the death of a loved one. Through this process, she came to understand that suffering and loss are universal, a part of the shared human experience. This insight, gained through her mindful journey, allowed her to let go of her son with peace. The story of Kisa Gautami illustrates that mindfulness is not just about observing our emotions. It is also about developing a compassionate understanding of our shared humanity, which can profoundly transform our response to pain and loss. In our modern lives, we can apply mindfulness to the stresses and pressures of daily life. For instance, think about the feeling of anxiety that often arises when we are overwhelmed by a to-do list or a looming deadline. In such moments, the mind is prone to spin stories of fear and worry, intensifying our sense of stress. With mindfulness, we can pause, take a breath, and simply observe our thoughts and sensations without judgment. We might say to ourselves, "I am noticing feelings of stress and worry." By acknowledging the emotion in this way, we can break the cycle of rumination and create space between our thoughts and our identity. Rather than seeing ourselves as stressed, we come to see stress as a passing state that does not define us. Another way mindfulness helps with emotional mastery is by teaching us to cultivate equanimity, a balanced state of mind that remains calm in the face of life's ups and downs. In the face of praise or criticism, gain or loss, mindfulness helps us remain centered, seeing these experiences as fleeting rather than permanent. This practice of equanimity is beautifully illustrated in the story of a wise Buddhist monk who was falsely accused of fathering a child. Instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, the monk simply said, "Is that so?" accepting the situation with calm composure. Later, when the truth came to light and his name was cleared, he responded in the same way, "Is that so?" This equanimous response is a testament to the power of mindfulness to create a mind that is resilient, unaffected by praise or blame, success or failure. In Buddhism, mindfulness is not just about individual peace, but about contributing to a more compassionate and harmonious world. When we learn to manage our own emotions, we are less likely to act out of anger or fear, which helps to reduce suffering in our interactions with others. The Buddha taught that by transforming our own minds, we can help transform the world. Through mindfulness, we cultivate patience, kindness, and understanding, qualities that ripple out and positively affect those around us. Mindfulness is a skill that requires practice. Meditation is the foundation upon which we build this skill, as it trains us to observe the mind with non-judgmental awareness. In meditation, we might begin by focusing on the breath, noticing each inhale and exhale. When thoughts and emotions arise, as they inevitably will, we gently bring our attention back to the breath. This practice teaches us to see emotions as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents, allowing us to navigate life's challenges with greater ease. In essence, mindfulness is the key to emotional mastery because it helps us see beyond the illusion that emotions are fixed or uncontrollable forces. It empowers us to engage with our emotions consciously, transforming reactive patterns into mindful responses. By cultivating mindfulness, we begin to see ourselves and others with greater clarity and compassion, creating a life that is both more peaceful and more resilient. Through mindfulness, we learn that our emotions are like waves in the ocean of the mind, constantly moving, but ultimately just passing phenomena. This understanding frees us from being overwhelmed by our emotions, allowing us to navigate life with a sense of calm and grounded awareness. In Buddhist philosophy, impermanence, or anicca, is a fundamental truth that reveals the transient nature of all things. From our relationships and possessions to our varied bodies and minds, everything is subject to change. Understanding and accepting this truth is essential for developing resilience and peace, as it enables us to experience joy without attachment and to endure sorrow without despair. Embracing impermanence helps us manage our emotional responses to both the highs and lows of life, providing a balanced perspective that liberates us from suffering. Impermanence is often illustrated by the natural world. Imagine a flower blooming in the spring. Its beauty is captivating, yet we know that its petals will eventually wilt and fall. Similarly, a storm may bring heavy rain and dark clouds, yet we know the sun will shine again. These cycles of growth and decay, light and darkness, are reminders that change is an inevitable part of existence. In our own lives, we experience similar cycles. The joy of a new friendship, the sorrow of a loved one's passing, the excitement of new opportunities, all of these experiences are marked by change. By truly understanding impermanence, we learn to hold life's pleasures lightly. For example, when we achieve a goal or celebrate a joyful occasion, we can savor the happiness without clinging to it, knowing that this moment, like all others, will pass. This doesn't mean we avoid happiness. Instead, we embrace it with the awareness that it, too, is transient. This approach allows us to experience joy more fully, free from the fear of losing it. One well-known story that highlights impermanence is that of King Pasenadi, a devoted disciple of the Buddha. When his beloved queen passed away, he was devastated, overwhelmed by sorrow. The Buddha, in his compassion, reminded the king of the nature of impermanence. In life, everything changes. Even those dearest to us will someday pass. This gentle teaching helped the king to process his grief with a greater sense of peace, understanding that his loss was part of the natural order of things. Through this acceptance, he was able to honor his queen's memory without being consumed by suffering. Impermanence also helps us cultivate equanimity, a balanced state of mind that remains steady in the face of both praise and blame, gain and loss. Take the example of a job promotion. Initially, we might feel elated, proud of our accomplishments and eager for new challenges. However, over time, the initial excitement may fade, and we might encounter difficulties and responsibilities that bring stress. By recognizing impermanence, we can appreciate the promotion's positive aspects without becoming overly attached to the status or praise it brings. We understand that our role, like everything else, will change over time. This perspective allows us to approach our work with dedication and openness, unburdened by the fear of loss or failure. On the flip side, the concept of impermanence can help us endure difficult times with resilience. Imagine someone going through a period of financial hardship. The stress and worry can feel overwhelming, leading them to believe that their situation will never improve. However, understanding impermanence provides comfort. It reminds us that even the most challenging circumstances are not fixed. They, too, will pass. This realization can inspire patience and hope, encouraging us to navigate hardships with a calm and open mind, knowing that brighter days will come. The Buddha often used the analogy of waves on the ocean to describe impermanence. Just as each wave rises and falls, our emotions and experiences follow a similar pattern. Happiness, sadness, anger, and love, all of these arise, peak, and eventually fade. By observing this natural rhythm, we can learn to remain present with each experience without becoming overly attached or averse to any of them. When we are angry, for instance, it can feel all-consuming, as if it will never end. But by recognizing that anger, like a wave, will eventually dissipate, we gain the strength to refrain from acting impulsively. We can sit with the emotion, observing it without judgment, until it passes. One particularly powerful story in Buddhist tradition that illustrates this principle is the story of the mustard seed, involving Kisa Gautami. After losing her only child, Kisa was devastated, unable to accept her child's death. In her desperation, she went to the Buddha, asking him to bring her son back to life. The Buddha, recognizing her intense suffering, gently told her to bring a mustard seed from a household that had never experienced death. Kisa went from house to house, but every family had experienced loss. Through this experience, she realized that death and separation are universal truths that touch every life. This understanding of impermanence allowed her to let go of her sorrow and find peace, honoring her child's memory without being paralyzed by grief. In our daily lives, the teachings of impermanence can help us manage attachment. When we understand that relationships, wealth, youth, and health are all impermanent, we can appreciate them fully without clinging to them. For instance, when we cultivate friendships or romantic relationships, we might feel an urge to hold tightly to those bonds, fearing the pain of separation. However, if we recognize that these relationships will inevitably change, we can love and appreciate those close to us without the burden of possessiveness. This does not mean we distance ourselves emotionally. Rather, we engage with others wholeheartedly, appreciating each moment of connection without the fear of loss. This practice of letting go of attachment is especially relevant in dealing with the loss of loved ones. In times of grief, it is natural to feel sorrow. However, by acknowledging impermanence, we can see death as a continuation of the natural cycle, a return to the elements from which we came. In many Buddhist cultures, death is not viewed with fear or avoidance, but with a sense of reverence and acceptance. For instance, Tibetan Buddhists often meditate on death, not as a morbid exercise, but as a way to remind themselves of life's preciousness. This practice encourages them to live with greater purpose and compassion, knowing that life is fleeting. Impermanence also teaches us to appreciate each moment without expecting it to last forever. This is evident in the Japanese concept of mono no aware, or the pathos of things, which reflects an appreciation for the beauty of the ephemeral. The Japanese cherry blossom season is a celebration of this idea. People gather to witness the cherry blossoms in full bloom, fully aware that the flowers will fall within days. This brief moment of beauty is cherished precisely because it is so short-lived. By celebrating the fleeting nature of the blossoms, they are reminded of life's beauty and transience. As we incorporate the concept of impermanence into our lives, we become more resilient and less reactive. When we face disappointment or failure, we can remind ourselves that this, too, will pass. If we encounter success or joy, we can savor it without attachment. In this way, impermanence becomes not a source of sorrow, but a source of strength. It frees us from the constant need to hold onto pleasure or avoid pain, allowing us to navigate life with grace and equanimity. By accepting impermanence, we begin to live more fully in the present moment, finding peace in the ever-changing flow of existence. Ultimately, embracing impermanence is an act of wisdom and compassion. It allows us to see ourselves and others with greater understanding, recognizing that our struggles and joys are all part of the shared human experience. By letting go of the illusion of permanence, we open ourselves to a deeper, more enduring peace, one that is rooted not in clinging, but in acceptance. In Buddhist philosophy, compassion is more than a noble quality. It is a transformative force that heals both the individual and those around them. Known as karuna in Pali and Sanskrit, compassion is considered essential for leading a life free of suffering. Through compassion, we recognize the interconnectedness of all beings, understanding that each person's joys, sorrows, and struggles are part of the human experience. Practicing compassion toward ourselves and others helps dissolve the boundaries of ego and self-centeredness, allowing us to approach life with an open heart, gentleness, and understanding. Self-compassion is especially important, yet it is often overlooked. In many cultures, there is an emphasis on achieving high standards and punishing oneself for failures, which can lead to feelings of inadequacy and self-criticism. Buddhism teaches that self-compassion is not only a kindness we offer ourselves, but a necessary foundation for true compassion toward others. When we are kind to ourselves, we create a sense of inner stability and peace, which then radiates outward. For example, imagine a person who has just experienced a personal failure, such as missing a career goal. If they react with harsh self-criticism, they might feel defeated, burdened by shame, and unable to move forward. However, if they respond with self-compassion, recognizing their disappointment and offering themselves words of understanding, they are more likely to regain their confidence and approach the future with resilience. One Buddhist story that beautifully illustrates compassion is the story of Angulimala, a feared bandit who terrorized villages. Known for wearing a garland of his victims' fingers, Angulimala was consumed by hatred and violence. Yet when he encountered the Buddha, something remarkable happened. The Buddha, instead of condemning him, extended compassion. He saw not a monster, but a person who was suffering deeply. The Buddha's compassion touched Angulimala so profoundly that he abandoned his violent ways and became a monk dedicated to helping others. This story serves as a reminder of compassion's potential to bring about profound transformation. Rather than casting others aside due to their flaws or mistakes, extending understanding and kindness can be a powerful act of healing, not only for them, but for ourselves. Compassion toward others also means recognizing that everyone is on their own path, shaped by circumstances, experiences, and inner struggles we may never fully understand. Imagine a situation in which someone acts unkindly toward us. A friend betrays us, a stranger speaks rudely, or a coworker is unnecessarily harsh. The immediate reaction might be anger or a desire to retaliate. However, Buddhism encourages us to pause and consider the pain or insecurity that may be underlying their actions. By responding with compassion, we break the cycle of resentment and retaliation, replacing it with understanding and peace. This does not mean excusing harmful behavior. Rather, it is an approach that allows us to respond wisely and gently, recognizing the suffering that may drive unkind actions. A classic analogy used in Buddhism to illustrate compassion is that of the mother's love for her child. A mother, seeing her child hurt or sick, is moved by compassion to help, not because she expects anything in return, but simply out of a deep love and desire to relieve the child's suffering. This type of unconditional love is what Buddhism encourages us to cultivate toward all beings, including ourselves. In doing so, we open ourselves to a vast, boundless compassion that is not limited to our loved ones, but extends to all sentient beings. Self-compassion, particularly, is necessary during times of failure or difficulty, yet it often feels challenging. We may have internalized beliefs that self-compassion is self-indulgent or weak. However, Buddhism teaches that self-compassion is a form of wisdom. When we treat ourselves with kindness, we create an inner environment that is conducive to growth and healing. Consider the story of the Buddha's enlightenment. After enduring severe ascetic practices that left him weak and close to death, the Buddha realized that extreme self-denial was not the path to liberation. Instead, he chose the middle way, a path of balance and compassion toward oneself. This shift was a pivotal moment, underscoring that kindness to oneself is essential on the spiritual journey. By caring for ourselves, we build the strength and clarity needed to extend compassion to others. There is also the story of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who embodies boundless compassion. Avalokiteshvara made a vow not to rest until all beings were free from suffering. However, witnessing the enormity of this suffering in the world, Avalokiteshvara felt his resolve waver, and he was overcome with despair. In that moment, he realized that he, too, needed compassion. He received help from Buddha Amitabha, who reminded him of the importance of compassion for oneself. This story serves as a profound reminder that even those who dedicate their lives to others must take care of their own emotional well-being. Just as we would not expect a candle to continue burning without fuel, we cannot extend compassion to others without nurturing ourselves. Everyday situations also offer opportunities to practice compassion. Imagine a tense moment at work. A coworker is stressed and snaps at you. Rather than reacting with frustration, a compassionate response would be to acknowledge that they may be struggling with pressures that have nothing to do with you. By responding with patience, you not only preserve your own peace, but also create a space in which the other person may feel understood. This small act of compassion can break the cycle of stress and negativity, fostering a more harmonious environment. Practicing compassion does not mean ignoring our own boundaries or needs. True compassion is rooted in wisdom and discernment, allowing us to offer kindness without sacrificing our well-being. In Buddhist teachings, this balance is often referred to as wise compassion. It involves knowing when to help and when to step back, recognizing that sometimes the most compassionate choice is to allow others to grow and learn through their own experiences. Another analogy often shared in Buddhist teachings is that of the lotus flower. The lotus grows in muddy water, yet it rises above the mud to bloom in pure beauty. In the same way, compassion allows us to rise above our own mud, our anger, resentment, and fear, and bloom in kindness and understanding. By cultivating compassion, we do not ignore the difficult or painful aspects of life. Rather, we transform them into a source of beauty and strength. In our modern lives, where we often encounter pressure and conflict, cultivating compassion can help us navigate these challenges with greater ease. Whether it's forgiving ourselves for a mistake or offering a kind word to someone in distress, each act of compassion creates ripples that extend far beyond our immediate surroundings. A kind word, a gentle touch, a moment of empathy, these small acts have the power to uplift, inspire, and connect us with others in a meaningful way. As we deepen our understanding of compassion, we come to see that it is not just an act, but a state of being. When we cultivate compassion consistently, it becomes our natural response, flowing effortlessly into all our interactions. This shift does not happen overnight. It is a gradual process of training the mind and heart to see the world through the lens of kindness. In Buddhism, this process is often likened to polishing a mirror. Over time, with practice and patience, the mirror of the mind becomes clear, reflecting the light of compassion back into the world. Ultimately, compassion is a gift we offer both to others and ourselves. It is a reminder that we are all interconnected, that each person's joy and suffering touch the whole. By practicing compassion, we honor this interconnectedness, fostering a world that is more loving, understanding, and peaceful. Through compassion, we learn that true happiness is found not in isolating ourselves from others, but in recognizing that we are all part of a shared human experience, bound together by the common desire to live with peace and dignity. In this way, compassion becomes not only a guiding principle, but a path to enlightenment itself. Breathing, a fundamental act of life, is often taken for granted. Yet, in Buddhism, breath is not just a physiological function. It is a key element in cultivating mindfulness, calming the mind, and achieving inner peace. The breath serves as a bridge between the body and the mind, a constant that connects us to the present moment. By focusing on the breath, we can tame the restless waves of our thoughts and return to a place of balance and clarity. In Buddhist teachings, breathwork is central to meditation practices, such as anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, and it plays an essential role in emotional regulation, especially in moments of stress or conflict. The breath, in its natural state, is a perfect tool for developing mindfulness. In Buddhist meditation, practitioners are often instructed to focus their attention on their breathing, observing the inhales and exhales without altering or controlling them. This simple practice helps to quiet the mental chatter, drawing awareness back to the present moment. This can be transformative when we are caught up in stressful or emotional situations. Whether it's a difficult conversation, a frustrating work scenario, or a moment of personal crisis, taking a few deep breaths can shift our awareness from the agitation of the mind to the calming rhythm of the body. One of the most well-known breathing techniques in Buddhism is the practice of anapanasati, which directly translates to mindfulness of breathing. The Buddha taught that by simply observing the breath as it enters and exits the body, we can develop concentration and awareness, which are the foundations for overcoming suffering. This practice allows the mind to settle and clear, creating a space for deeper insight and understanding. In the midst of a tense situation, this breathing technique can serve as an anchor, grounding us in the present moment and preventing us from becoming overwhelmed by the emotions or external events around us. In anapanasati, the breath is observed in stages. First, simply noticing the breath as it flows in and out. Then, deepening the focus by observing the sensations of the breath in the body, such as the rising and falling of the abdomen or the sensation of the air at the nostrils. This focus on the breath creates a strong sense of mindfulness, which helps the practitioner to cultivate clarity and peace. In times of emotional turbulence, these few moments of focused breathing can act as a powerful reset for the mind, allowing us to move from a reactive state to a more thoughtful, balanced one. A powerful example of how breath can transform emotional reactions comes from the teachings of the famous Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron. She often shares a story in which she was overwhelmed with anger during a difficult situation. In that moment, she remembered her teacher's advice to breathe deeply and stay with the anger rather than acting on it. By simply pausing and focusing on the breath, she was able to create a space between the anger and her response, allowing her to choose a more compassionate and wise course of action. This story highlights how, even in moments of intense emotion, breathing can be a tool for cultivating awareness and making more intentional choices. Rather than reacting impulsively to our feelings, we can use the breath as a way to pause, reflect, and decide how to respond from a place of greater clarity. Another well-known Buddhist story that illustrates the power of breath in managing emotions comes from the life of the Buddha himself. After his enlightenment, the Buddha was often called upon to help resolve disputes and conflicts. One such story involves a monk who was furious with another monk for some minor infraction. The Buddha, seeing that the situation was escalating, instructed the monks to sit and focus on their breath for a few moments. As they did so, their agitation began to settle and their minds cleared. With their emotions tempered, they were able to approach the situation with greater understanding and resolve the conflict peacefully. This story serves as a reminder that the practice of mindfulness through breathing can transform our immediate reactions to challenging situations and open the door to peaceful resolution. Breathing techniques in Buddhism also extend beyond anapanasati. Another important practice is the upekkha breath, or the breath of equanimity. Equanimity is one of the four Brahmaviharas, or divine abodes, and it refers to a state of mental and emotional balance, unaffected by extremes of joy or sorrow, praise or blame. The upekkha breath is practiced by inhaling slowly and deeply, holding the breath for a moment, and then exhaling slowly. This process can help to bring balance and stability to the mind, especially in moments of emotional overwhelm. By practicing this technique regularly, we train the mind to respond to challenges with a calm and centered presence rather than being swept away by reactive emotions. The importance of controlled breathing in Buddhism can also be seen in the practice of pranayama, which is more commonly associated with yoga but has its roots in ancient Indian spiritual practices, including Buddhism. Pranayama is the regulation of breath to enhance the flow of life force, or prana, within the body. In Buddhist practice, breathing exercises are often used to balance the body's energy and clear the mind of distractions. In particular, long, deep breaths are thought to calm the nervous system and promote a sense of peace and mental clarity. By integrating breath control into our daily routine, we can reduce stress and increase our ability to stay present, even in the most challenging of situations. In addition to the physical benefits, breathwork in Buddhism also cultivates spiritual awareness. The breath, in its simplicity, becomes a profound symbol of life itself, constant, ever-present, and intimately connected to our inner state of being. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha reminds us that our minds are like choppy waters, disturbed by countless thoughts and emotions. The breath, however, is likened to a steady wind that can calm those waters, bringing them to a serene and tranquil state. In this way, the act of focusing on the breath becomes a metaphor for the larger spiritual journey. Through mindfulness, concentration, and understanding, we can calm the turbulence of our inner world and find the peace that lies beneath the surface. Real-life applications of these breathing techniques can be seen in countless moments where we encounter stress, anxiety, or emotional conflict. For instance, in a tense work meeting, instead of becoming defensive or overwhelmed by stress, we can pause and focus on our breath. By breathing deeply and calmly, we can shift our focus away from the tension and respond more thoughtfully, reducing the chance of reacting impulsively. Similarly, in a heated argument with a loved one, instead of allowing emotions to escalate, we can take a moment to breathe, allowing space for reflection before speaking. In these ways, the practice of mindful breathing becomes an invaluable tool for emotional regulation. Breathing techniques can also be particularly helpful during times of deep grief or sorrow. In Buddhist teachings, all emotions, whether positive or negative, are seen as impermanent. By focusing on the breath and understanding that emotions arise and pass away like clouds in the sky, we can navigate even the most painful emotions with greater ease. In times of loss, deep breathing can help to steady the heart, allowing us to hold space for grief without being consumed by it. This acceptance of our emotions, coupled with the mindfulness of our breath, enables us to move through difficult times with compassion and wisdom. The practice of breathing as a tool for emotional balance is not limited to moments of crisis. Regular practice of mindful breathing can help to cultivate a calm, centered mind even in the midst of our daily lives. By integrating deep breathing into our routines, we create an internal space of peace and balance that can transform how we approach challenges and relationships. In Buddhism, it is said that the true path to peace is found not in avoiding difficulties, but in facing them with clarity, compassion, and mindfulness. Through the simple yet profound practice of mindful breathing, we can embody these qualities and begin to experience life more fully, with greater peace and joy. In Buddhist philosophy, attachment is seen as one of the root causes of suffering. The Buddha taught that our attachments to people, objects, and outcomes create a cycle of desire, expectation, and disappointment that binds us to suffering. This emotional dependence, driven by the longing for things to go a certain way or for people to behave as we expect them to, can lead to deep dissatisfaction and emotional turmoil. To break free from this cycle, Buddhist wisdom encourages us to cultivate detachment, not in the sense of indifference or coldness, but as a way to relate to the world with a sense of freedom and balance. By understanding the impermanent nature of all things and accepting that nothing is truly within our control, we can reduce our emotional dependence and find greater peace, even in the most challenging circumstances. The Buddha's teachings on attachment revolve around the concept of tanha, craving, and upadana, clinging. Both of these terms refer to the ways in which we attach ourselves to objects, desires, or outcomes, thinking that they will bring us lasting happiness. Yet, in reality, these attachments often lead to frustration because, as Buddhism teaches, all things are impermanent. People change, situations evolve, and life itself is in a constant state of flux. When we attach ourselves too strongly to any specific outcome or person, we set ourselves up for disappointment, as those things are not fixed or permanent. To manage this emotional dependence, Buddhism advocates for a shift in perspective, one where we let go of the need for specific outcomes and learn to cultivate an open heart and mind, free from expectations. A clear example of this can be seen in personal relationships. Often, we enter relationships with a strong desire for the other person to meet our needs, to make us happy, or to behave in certain ways that align with our expectations. We may become emotionally dependent on their approval, affection, or behavior, hoping that their actions will bring us lasting contentment. However, the truth is that no one can always meet our needs perfectly, nor can they be the source of our ultimate happiness. When we invest too much of our emotional well-being in another person's actions or reactions, we risk becoming frustrated, resentful, or disillusioned when things don't go as we had hoped. For instance, in romantic relationships, if we place unrealistic expectations on our partner to be perfect or to fulfill all our emotional needs, we may experience deep disappointment when these expectations inevitably go unmet. Rather than finding fulfillment within ourselves, we place the responsibility for our happiness outside of ourselves, in the hands of someone else. A powerful teaching from the Buddha can be found in the story of Kisagami, a woman who experienced profound grief after the death of her child. In her sorrow, she went to the Buddha, seeking a remedy for her pain. The Buddha, understanding her suffering, instructed her to go and find a mustard seed from a household where no one had ever died. Kisagami searched tirelessly, visiting countless homes, but she could not find a single family who had not experienced death. Ultimately, she returned to the Buddha, having realized the universal truth of impermanence. Her attachment to the hope of saving her child had caused her great suffering, but through this profound realization, she was able to let go of her expectations and find peace in accepting the nature of life and death. This story illustrates how our attachment to specific outcomes, whether it be the desire for someone to stay in our lives forever, or for things to unfold in a particular way, leads to unnecessary pain. By letting go of such attachments, we can find freedom from emotional dependence and come to terms with life as it is. The Buddha's teachings also emphasize that attachment to particular outcomes in life, including work or personal achievements, leads to suffering because those outcomes are often beyond our control. For example, in the workplace, we may strive for a promotion, recognition, or a particular outcome from a project. While it is natural to put in effort and hope for success, attachment to the idea that we must achieve a specific result can lead to stress, frustration, and even feelings of inadequacy when things don't go as planned. Buddhism encourages us to do our best, but also to relinquish the need for specific results. By doing so, we can engage in our work with greater joy, creativity, and focus, knowing that the process itself, rather than the outcome, is where true satisfaction lies. One story that exemplifies this teaching comes from the life of the Buddha himself. Before his enlightenment, the Buddha, then known as Prince Siddhartha, led a life of extreme self-discipline, striving for perfection in his meditation and ascetic practices. He pushed himself to the brink of starvation and endured great hardships, believing that this intense effort would lead to liberation. However, he soon realized that attachment to a specific outcome, the desire to attain enlightenment through extreme practices, was not the path to true peace. In an act of profound insight, he decided to abandon the rigid discipline and instead embrace the middle way, a balanced approach that neither indulges in the extremes of self-gratification nor self-mortification. This shift in perspective allowed him to find the inner peace he sought, without clinging to specific expectations of how or when enlightenment should occur. The Buddha's story teaches us that, in order to truly experience peace, we must let go of our attachments to particular outcomes and embrace the unfolding of life as it comes. In everyday life, learning to let go of emotional dependence can transform our interactions with others. Take, for example, the relationship between a parent and child. Parents naturally want the best for their children and may become attached to the idea of their children succeeding or living a particular life. However, excessive attachment to the outcomes of their child's life can create tension and anxiety, especially when the child makes choices that don't align with the parent's expectations. By releasing the need to control their child's path and accepting them as they are, parents can cultivate a deeper, more loving relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. This doesn't mean abandoning care or guidance, but rather recognizing that the ultimate happiness of another person is not in our hands, and that their journey is their own to navigate. Another area where attachment often causes frustration is in friendships. We may become emotionally dependent on friends for validation, companionship, or emotional support, thinking that they must always be there to fulfill our needs. When friends are unavailable or when misunderstandings arise, it can lead to feelings of resentment or hurt. The Buddha's teachings on non-attachment suggest that we approach relationships with an open heart, but without the expectation that others will always meet our desires or behave in ways we want. By releasing these expectations, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering and allow relationships to flourish naturally, without the weight of emotional dependence. The Buddha's concept of non-attachment does not encourage disengagement from life or a lack of care for others. Rather, it invites us to engage fully in life and relationships, but without clinging to the outcome. By practicing this type of detachment, we can embrace life's inevitable ups and downs with equanimity, knowing that our peace of mind is not contingent upon things turning out a certain way. This approach helps us to reduce emotional dependence on people or outcomes and fosters a deep sense of inner freedom, where we can enjoy life fully without being enslaved by our attachments. One of the core tenets of Buddhist philosophy is the understanding that much of our suffering arises from unrealistic expectations. These expectations often stem from a belief that things should unfold according to our desires, and when they don't, we experience frustration, disappointment, and emotional pain. In Buddhism, this concept is closely linked to the idea of craving or tanha, the insatiable desire for things to be different from how they are. The Buddha taught that the more tightly we cling to expectations, the more suffering we invite into our lives. Learning to set realistic expectations, both for ourselves and for others, is essential in order to avoid unnecessary suffering and to foster a greater sense of peace and contentment. Realistic expectations are grounded in the understanding of impermanence, the Buddhist principle that everything is subject to change. If we accept that life is fluid and unpredictable, we can adjust our expectations accordingly and avoid the pain that comes when things do not go as planned. For example, in friendships, we often expect a certain level of consistency from our friends. We hope that they will always be available to offer support, that they will act in ways that meet our needs, and that they will always be there when we need them. However, when these expectations are not met, we may feel hurt, abandoned, or disappointed. In reality, all relationships have ebbs and flows, and people's availability, emotional capacity, and actions are shaped by their own lives and experiences. By setting realistic expectations, we can release the need for constant affirmation and learn to appreciate our friends for who they are, without expecting them to always be available or behave in ways we anticipate. This shift in perspective allows for a more genuine and resilient connection, free from the burden of unmet expectations. Similarly, in family dynamics, expectations can often be a source of strain. Parents may have hopes and dreams for their children, wishing for them to follow a certain path or to live up to certain ideals. Children, on the other hand, may expect unconditional support and understanding from their parents, sometimes feeling the weight of parental expectations as a form of pressure. When either party's expectations are not met, it can lead to feelings of disappointment, guilt, or resentment. In Buddhist practice, the idea of setting realistic expectations is deeply connected to the cultivation of compassion and understanding. Instead of holding on to rigid ideas about what a family relationship should look like, we are encouraged to accept each family member as they are, with their strengths and flaws, their challenges and their growth. By acknowledging the impermanent and evolving nature of family dynamics, we can approach our relationships with greater patience, flexibility, and kindness. A powerful story from the life of the Buddha illustrates this principle of setting realistic expectations. There was a woman named Kisagami who, after the death of her child, went to the Buddha seeking a way to bring her son back to life. In her grief, she was consumed by the expectation that her child could be restored, and she was unwilling to accept the reality of impermanence. The Buddha, seeing her suffering, sent her on a quest to find a mustard seed from a family that had never known death. Kisagami searched far and wide, but no family existed that had not experienced the death of a loved one. Upon realizing the universality of death and impermanence, Kisagami let go of her unrealistic expectation of restoring her child and, in doing so, found the path to healing. This story teaches us the importance of setting realistic expectations about life's inevitable losses and the need to embrace the transient nature of existence. Just as death is a universal reality, so too are the changes and challenges we face in our relationships and personal lives. Another example of how unrealistic expectations can cause suffering can be found in the story of Prince Siddhartha before he became the Buddha. As a young prince, Siddhartha was shielded from the harsh realities of life. His father, King Suddhodana, went to great lengths to ensure that Siddhartha was exposed only to pleasure and comfort, believing that his son would become a powerful ruler if he was kept away from the suffering of the world. Siddhartha, however, eventually encountered the realities of old age, sickness, and death, and was deeply disturbed by the impermanence and suffering inherent in human life. His initial expectation that life could be free from suffering was shattered, leading him to embark on a journey of deep introspection and spiritual awakening. This moment of realization helped Siddhartha understand that the world is full of suffering, and that to transcend it, one must let go of unrealistic expectations and attachments. He then sought a path of balance and wisdom, discovering the middle way, which does not rely on the extremes of indulgence or asceticism, but instead encourages a more realistic and compassionate approach to life. In our own lives, unrealistic expectations often lead us to become attached to specific outcomes, especially in work situations or personal achievements. For instance, at work, we may expect that our efforts will always be rewarded with promotions, recognition, or financial success. We may expect our colleagues to always cooperate and agree with us, or we may feel frustrated when our projects do not go as smoothly as we had hoped. These expectations can create tension, stress, and disappointment, especially when the results do not match our desires. In Buddhism, we are encouraged to focus on the process rather than the outcome, understanding that success and failure are impermanent and that both are part of the natural ebb and flow of life. By setting more realistic expectations about our work, we can engage in our tasks with greater mindfulness, accepting that not every project will be perfect and not every outcome will meet our desired standard. This acceptance allows us to perform with greater equanimity, freeing us from the burden of disappointment and frustration. In personal growth, the expectation that we should always be happy or successful can lead to feelings of inadequacy when we inevitably encounter obstacles or setbacks. The Buddha taught that suffering is a part of life, and that it is unrealistic to expect constant happiness or smooth sailing. Instead of striving for an unattainable state of perpetual joy, we can learn to accept the full range of human experience, joy and sorrow, success and failure, as natural and necessary aspects of life. By setting realistic expectations about the fluctuations of our emotions and the ups and downs of our journey, we can reduce the emotional strain caused by unrealistic self-imposed pressures. Buddhism encourages us to meet life's challenges with wisdom and compassion, setting realistic expectations that align with the impermanent nature of existence. When we let go of rigid ideas about how life should be, we free ourselves from the cycle of disappointment and frustration. By acknowledging that things do not always go as planned, and by accepting ourselves and others with compassion and understanding, we can approach each moment with greater peace and equanimity. Setting realistic expectations helps us navigate the complexities of life with greater ease, knowing that we do not need to control everything, but can instead flow with life's natural rhythms, embracing both the joys and the sorrows with an open heart. Meditation, a cornerstone of Buddhist practice, is not only a tool for spiritual enlightenment, but also a profound method for strengthening emotional resilience. In the fast-paced, often chaotic nature of modern life, where stress, anger, anxiety, and fear can easily overwhelm the mind, meditation offers a sanctuary for those seeking stability and peace within themselves. Through consistent practice, meditation allows us to observe our emotions without being controlled by them, enabling us to respond with clarity rather than impulsivity. Buddhist teachings emphasize that by cultivating a calm and mindful awareness of the present moment, we can break the cycle of emotional reactivity and transform our relationship with difficult emotions. The Buddhist teachings on meditation are centered on the cultivation of mindfulness, or sati, which involves observing the present moment without judgment. When we meditate, we train ourselves to become aware of our thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations as they arise. By doing so, we gain insight into the impermanent nature of all experiences. Just as clouds move across the sky, emotions arise and pass away. This understanding allows us to step back from the intensity of our feelings, observing them with a sense of detachment rather than becoming entangled in them. Over time, this practice builds emotional resilience, as we become less identified with our emotions and more capable of letting them go. Consider a situation where a person feels a surge of anger in response to a stressful interaction with a colleague. Without meditation, this anger might lead to impulsive reactions, shouting, withdrawing, or saying things that one might later regret. However, through a daily meditation practice, that same individual might develop the ability to pause, to breathe deeply, and to observe the anger as it arises in the body and mind. In doing so, the person can create a space between stimulus and response, choosing a mindful reaction rather than acting on impulse. Meditation cultivates this capacity to respond skillfully, rather than react destructively, to difficult emotions such as anger, anxiety, and fear. One of the most powerful forms of meditation in Buddhism is vipassana, or insight meditation, which involves observing the body and mind in their natural state, without attachment or aversion. Through vipassana, practitioners develop a deep understanding of the impermanent nature of all phenomena, including their emotions. For example, when anxiety arises, a meditator can learn to observe the physical sensations of anxiety, the tightness in the chest, the rapid heartbeat, the sense of unease, without being consumed by them. Over time, with repeated practice, the meditator realizes that anxiety, like all emotions, is temporary. It may return, but it will also fade away. This realization creates a profound shift in the way we relate to difficult emotions, allowing us to hold them with a sense of openness and acceptance rather than resistance. The Buddha himself spoke often about the power of meditation to transform the mind and emotions. In the Dhammapada, a collection of his sayings, he teaches that a moment of anger destroys the mind, and that we must train ourselves to overcome such destructive emotions through mindfulness and meditation. The Buddha's own journey of enlightenment involved deep meditation under the Bodhi tree, where he confronted the myriad temptations and fears that arose within him. By observing his mind with mindfulness, he was able to transcend these emotions, ultimately attaining the wisdom that led to his awakening. This story underscores the transformative power of meditation. It is through consistent practice that we can transcend our habitual emotional reactions and gain mastery over our minds. In the same way, there is a story from the life of Ajahn Chah, one of the most revered Thai Buddhist monks of the 20th century. Ajahn Chah was known for his profound teachings on mindfulness and meditation. On one occasion, a monk asked him how to deal with anger. Ajahn Chah responded by saying that, rather than suppressing the anger, one should simply observe it. If you have anger, he said, sit with it. Feel its heat. Notice where it arises in your body. Then, with mindfulness, you will begin to see that it is not permanent. It is just a wave of energy passing through. Ajahn Chah's advice encapsulates the essence of Buddhist meditation. Rather than avoiding or repressing negative emotions, we learn to observe them with equanimity, understanding their impermanence, and releasing them when they no longer serve us. Meditation not only helps us manage individual emotions, but it also helps us build resilience against the cumulative effects of stress and anxiety over time. When we meditate daily, even for just a short period, we begin to cultivate a steady, unshakable foundation within ourselves. Just as a tree with deep roots can withstand fierce winds, a mind trained through meditation is more stable and less likely to be blown off course by the storms of life. By making meditation a daily habit, we create a space for mindfulness to flourish, where emotional disturbances have less power over us. For those new to meditation, it can be helpful to start with a simple breathing practice. Find a quiet space, sit comfortably, and focus your attention on your breath. Inhale deeply through your nose, allowing your belly to expand, and exhale slowly through your mouth. As you breathe, simply observe the sensation of the breath entering and leaving your body. Thoughts, emotions, and distractions will inevitably arise, but the key is to return your attention to the breath without judgment or frustration. Over time, this practice will build the capacity to remain calm and centered, even in the face of difficult emotions. The long-term impact of meditation on emotional resilience is profound. Studies have shown that regular meditation practice can reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression, increase feelings of well-being, and enhance emotional regulation. Meditation helps rewire the brain, strengthening the areas responsible for empathy, self-awareness, and emotional control, while reducing the activity of the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with fear and stress responses. This scientific evidence aligns closely with the Buddha's teachings, which emphasize the importance of training the mind to remain calm, focused, and equanimous in the face of life's challenges. As we meditate and develop emotional resilience, we also cultivate compassion, both for ourselves and others. In Buddhist practice, compassion is not just about feeling sympathy for others, but about developing a deep understanding of their suffering and responding with kindness. When we are able to calm our own minds through meditation, we are better equipped to respond with empathy and patience to the suffering of others. This creates a ripple effect, fostering peace not only within ourselves but also in the world around us. Meditation is a powerful tool for emotional transformation. Through regular practice, we can strengthen our emotional resilience, gain greater control over our reactions, and navigate life's challenges with wisdom and compassion. By learning to observe our emotions with mindfulness and detachment, we can transform anger, anxiety, and fear into opportunities for growth, creating a foundation of peace and emotional stability that supports us through all of life's ups and downs. In the whirlwind of modern life, it's easy to become consumed by the past or preoccupied with the future. Many of us carry the weight of regret, guilt, or unhealed wounds from the past, while simultaneously worrying about what lies ahead. We plan for the future, try to predict outcomes, and often our minds become cluttered with what ifs and anxieties. However, the core teachings of Buddhism emphasize the profound value of living in the present moment. Mindfulness, as taught by the Buddha, is the art of fully engaging with the now, being aware of what is happening in the present without being distracted by past regrets or future anxieties. By cultivating this awareness, we can significantly reduce stress and improve our emotional resilience, allowing us to approach life's challenges with a sense of peace and clarity. The Buddha's own enlightenment was a direct result of his ability to cultivate mindfulness and live in the present moment. Before attaining enlightenment, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, spent years searching for answers, first through ascetic practices and then by meditating under the Bodhi tree. It was only when he fully embraced the present moment, letting go of all attachments to the past and future, that he realized the nature of suffering and the path to liberation. He sat in meditation, not focused on past experiences or worries about the future, but simply being with the moment as it was. In this stillness, he became awakened to the truth of impermanence and the realization that all suffering arises from attachment and craving. One of the key principles in Buddhism that supports this teaching is the concept of dukkha, which is often translated as suffering, but also encompasses the deeper sense of dissatisfaction that arises when we cling to the past or obsess over the future. The Buddha taught that all beings experience dukkha because they are caught in a cycle of craving and aversion. We crave things to stay the same or become better, and we resist change. This resistance, born of attachment to a specific outcome, whether from the past or towards the future, leads to suffering. Living in the moment, as the Buddha taught, involves letting go of this attachment. It's not about ignoring the past or future, but about releasing the hold they have over us. When we become mindful of the present, we learn to embrace what is happening now, without clinging to what has already passed or fearing what might come. This practice of mindfulness brings a sense of freedom and peace, for when we are no longer burdened by past regrets or future anxieties, we are free to engage fully with our lives. The teachings of mindfulness and living in the moment can be illustrated through simple, everyday tasks. Take, for example, the act of washing dishes. Most people, when washing dishes, might find their minds drifting to the tasks ahead, what needs to be done next, what happened during the day, or what they could have done differently. This distraction can make even simple tasks feel burdensome. However, when we approach washing the dishes with mindfulness, we bring our full attention to the present moment. We feel the warm water, hear the clinking of the plates, and notice the soap suds on our hands. By focusing on the task at hand, without judgment or distraction, the act becomes less of a chore and more of a peaceful, grounding experience. This simple practice is a reflection of the Buddha's teaching that we can find peace in any moment, no matter how mundane or ordinary it may seem. A famous story from the life of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, a modern-day Buddhist monk known for his teachings on mindfulness, illustrates the importance of living in the present. Thich Nhat Hanh was once walking with a group of students in the mountains. As they walked, he instructed them to take note of everything around them: the trees, the sounds, the colors, the smells, everything they encountered on their walk. One of the students remarked that they would appreciate the walk more if they were not thinking about what was coming next, such as lunch or the next task. Thich Nhat Hanh smiled and said, "The path we are walking is already here. We don't need to wait for it. The moment is already present." This story beautifully encapsulates the idea that mindfulness is not something we need to seek outside of ourselves or in the future, but something we can cultivate in the present moment. By being aware of where we are and what we are doing, we can unlock peace and contentment in the here and now. Another example comes from the life of Ajahn Chah, a renowned Thai Buddhist teacher. Ajahn Chah often spoke of how the mind tends to wander, pulled in different directions by past memories and future worries. In his teachings, he encouraged his students to be here now. Once, a layperson came to him in distress, worried about the challenges they were facing in life. Ajahn Chah replied, "You are suffering because you are not here. You are worrying about things that are not happening right now. You are creating stories in your mind. If you focus on the present moment, you will find that there is no suffering here." This simple but profound teaching highlights how attachment to the past and future can perpetuate suffering. When we are not truly present, we miss the richness of the moment and become trapped in cycles of worry and dissatisfaction. Buddhist monks and practitioners often live by the principle of one thing at a time. This means that whether they are eating, walking, or working, they do so with full attention, focusing entirely on the task at hand. This practice helps to prevent the mind from scattering in a million different directions and allows the individual to experience life more deeply and with greater clarity. This attitude of being fully present also has significant implications for how we approach personal relationships. When we are constantly distracted by thoughts of the past or future, we may fail to truly listen to others or be present in our interactions. A Buddhist approach to relationships encourages mindful listening, where we listen with full attention and engage fully in the moment with our loved ones. Mindfulness also helps us to let go of expectations. In a world that often pressures us to plan for the future and attain specific outcomes, mindfulness teaches us to release this attachment. When we let go of rigid expectations, we open ourselves to the possibility of experiencing life in a more fluid and open way. For example, in a work situation, if we approach a project without becoming overly attached to a specific outcome, we are less likely to experience frustration when things don't go as planned. Instead, we can simply observe what happens and adjust accordingly. This mindset allows for greater flexibility, adaptability, and ultimately peace of mind. The value of living in the moment and avoiding excessive worry about the past or future is a profound teaching in Buddhism. By embracing mindfulness, we can find joy and peace in even the most ordinary moments. We free ourselves from the cycle of regret and anxiety and begin to live more fully, engaging deeply with each moment as it comes. This practice does not require a special place or time. It can be cultivated anywhere, at any moment, and it can transform how we approach all aspects of our lives, from our relationships to our work and personal well-being. As the Buddha himself taught, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. Through mindfulness, we learn that the present is where true peace lies, and in living fully in the now, we unlock the wisdom and happiness that are always available to us. One of the most fundamental teachings of Buddhism is the impermanence of all things. Life, by its very nature, is constantly changing. The Buddha taught that nothing is permanent, not our emotions, our bodies, our relationships, nor our experiences. All things are subject to change, decay, and eventually cessation. This truth of impermanence can be both liberating and daunting. However, the Buddhist path encourages us to accept this ever-changing nature of existence, which allows us to face life's fluctuations with equanimity rather than resistance. Resistance to change is often the root of much suffering. When we encounter difficulties, whether they are personal losses, unexpected challenges, or even the small irritations of daily life, our natural tendency is often to resist. We might deny the reality of the situation, fight against it, or wish that things were different. This resistance creates tension, fear, and frustration. However, when we learn to accept that life is in constant flux, we can meet challenges with a sense of peace and understanding, even in the most difficult circumstances. In Buddhist philosophy, this acceptance is not a form of passivity or resignation, but rather an active recognition of the nature of existence. The Buddha taught that our suffering arises not from the events themselves, but from our attachment to how we think things should be. For instance, if we cling to the idea that life should always be smooth or predictable, when we encounter setbacks, we are likely to experience disappointment, anger, or despair. On the other hand, if we recognize that change is inevitable and that challenges are a part of life, we can approach them with an open heart and a calm mind. A famous story from the Buddha's own life illustrates the power of acceptance. After the Buddha attained enlightenment, he was once approached by a woman named Gautami, who was grieving the death of her child. In her sorrow, she went from house to house, seeking a remedy to bring her son back to life. Desperate, she finally approached the Buddha and asked him to help her. The Buddha, understanding the nature of her suffering, told her to bring a handful of mustard seeds from a house where no one had ever died. She went on her search, but each house she visited had experienced death in some form, and she was unable to find any mustard seeds that fit the Buddha's requirement. Through this process, Gautami came to realize that death is a universal part of life, and that her suffering was rooted in her inability to accept the reality of impermanence. By the time she returned to the Buddha, she had let go of her attachment to her child and the idealized notion of permanence, finding peace in the truth of life's ever-changing nature. The story highlights that true healing and peace come from accepting the impermanence of life and embracing the flow of change, rather than resisting it. In our own lives, we can draw lessons from this story and the Buddha's teachings. Imagine facing a sudden job loss. It might be easy to become frustrated, angry, or anxious about the uncertainty it brings. However, by accepting the impermanence of our career path, we open ourselves to new possibilities. Instead of resisting the change, we can approach the situation with curiosity and equanimity. Acceptance allows us to take practical steps without being clouded by the emotional turbulence of resistance. We can ask ourselves, what is the next right step I can take? What opportunities are arising from this shift? In doing so, we free ourselves from the paralysis of fear and disappointment, and we step into a new phase of life with openness and confidence. Similarly, we can apply the Buddhist perspective of acceptance to the fluctuations in our personal relationships. Relationships, by nature, are not static. They evolve, change, and sometimes they end. Many people suffer greatly when relationships change, whether it's the end of a romantic partnership, the death of a loved one, or even the growing apart of friends. We might feel anger, loss, or betrayal, especially when we are attached to a particular outcome, such as staying forever in a relationship as it was at the beginning. However, by embracing the Buddhist understanding of impermanence, we come to realize that every relationship is part of a natural flow. When we stop clinging to an idealized version of how a relationship should be, we can appreciate the changes that happen, even if they bring sadness. Through this lens, we learn to love more freely, without attachment, and to let go with grace when necessary. In the face of setbacks, whether they are small inconveniences or life-altering challenges, Buddhist wisdom encourages us to cultivate patience and mindfulness. By practicing sati, mindfulness, and upekkha, equanimity, we can train ourselves to respond to life's flux with a calm and balanced mind. Equanimity, in particular, is the quality that allows us to maintain mental steadiness, even in the face of great adversity. The Buddha taught that through equanimity, we can face both pleasure and pain without becoming overly attached to either. It is the balanced response to life's inevitable ups and downs. A modern example of this can be seen in the life of the renowned Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron. In her teachings, Pema often discusses the importance of embracing uncertainty and impermanence as a path to spiritual growth. She tells the story of how, when she first became a nun, she faced numerous challenges in her meditation practice. At times, she struggled with feelings of frustration, doubt, and discomfort. However, instead of resisting these feelings, she chose to embrace them as part of her practice. She learned to sit with discomfort, to accept the ebb and flow of her emotions, and to allow herself to experience each moment fully, without judgment or resistance. Through this process, she discovered that true peace does not come from avoiding discomfort, but from embracing it with an open heart. Another story that illustrates the value of acceptance comes from the Zen tradition. The Zen master Shunryu Suzuki once said, "When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you." This teaching points to the deep acceptance that comes from realizing that life, in its impermanence and constant flux, is complete as it is. When we stop striving for perfection or clinging to specific outcomes, we are able to accept things as they are. This acceptance leads to inner peace, for we are no longer at war with the present moment. Acceptance of life's flux and changes is not a passive resignation to fate, but an active practice of recognizing and embracing the inherent impermanence of all things. By letting go of our attachments and resisting less, we make space for peace, joy, and clarity in our lives. Buddhist teachings encourage us to cultivate an attitude of acceptance, for in doing so, we are able to respond to life's inevitable challenges with equanimity. This practice does not mean we will never face difficulty or loss, but it enables us to meet them with understanding and composure, transforming potential suffering into opportunities for growth and wisdom. Life's changes, when met with acceptance, no longer need to be feared. Instead, they become an invitation to embrace the flow of life with open arms, knowing that in each moment, we are exactly where we need to be. In the fast-paced, consumer-driven world we live in today, simplicity often seems like an elusive ideal. We are constantly bombarded by messages that tell us we need more possessions, more experiences, more recognition. We are encouraged to chase after the latest trends, technological gadgets, or fleeting pleasures, all of which promise to bring us happiness and fulfillment. Yet, as countless people have discovered, this endless pursuit of more only leads to dissatisfaction and an insatiable desire for more, creating a cycle of craving and discontent. In Buddhism, simplicity is not just a lifestyle choice but a path to peace, contentment, and spiritual growth. The Buddha's teachings encourage us to reduce desires and live simply, finding joy in the present moment and contentment in what we have. One of the core principles in Buddhism is the understanding of dukkha, often translated as suffering or dissatisfaction. This concept extends beyond just physical pain. It encompasses the emotional and mental turmoil that arises from attachment and desire. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from our craving and clinging to things, people, and outcomes. Desire, when left unchecked, binds us to a cycle of endless seeking, always hoping that the next possession or experience will finally bring us happiness. However, as we see time and time again, this desire only creates a deeper yearning that can never truly be satisfied. Through mindfulness, meditation, and simplicity, Buddhism offers a way to break this cycle and find contentment in what is already here. One of the most effective ways to cultivate simplicity is by reducing our desires, especially in areas that consume our time and energy without adding true value to our lives. The Buddha famously taught the middle way, a path of moderation that avoids the extremes of indulgence and asceticism. This concept can be applied to many aspects of our modern lives. For example, in today's digital age, we are constantly inundated with information, notifications, and entertainment options. Social media, online shopping, and endless content streaming can easily overwhelm our senses and take up much of our time, leaving us feeling disconnected and dissatisfied. Buddhism encourages us to simplify our digital consumption, setting boundaries and focusing on the activities that truly nourish our minds and spirits. This might mean limiting time spent on screens, engaging more meaningfully in face-to-face conversations, or finding time for quiet reflection and meditation. By reducing our reliance on external sources of stimulation, we can cultivate a sense of inner peace and self-sufficiency. Another important aspect of simplicity in Buddhism is the practice of renunciation, not in the sense of rejecting life entirely, but in letting go of unnecessary attachments and desires. The Buddha did not advocate for abandoning all possessions, but rather for recognizing the impermanence of material things and understanding that true happiness does not depend on external acquisitions. The story of the Buddha's life provides a powerful example of this teaching. Before his enlightenment, Prince Siddhartha was surrounded by luxury and comfort. He had everything one could desire: wealth, status, and a family. However, he found that none of these things brought lasting happiness or fulfillment. In his quest for enlightenment, he left behind his palace and possessions, not out of disdain for them, but because he understood that attachment to worldly things would only keep him trapped in the cycle of suffering. Similarly, in our own lives, we can learn to let go of unnecessary attachments. For instance, many of us become attached to our jobs, social status, or material possessions, believing that they define who we are and will bring us lasting happiness. However, when we lose these things, we can feel as though we have lost a part of ourselves. By practicing renunciation in small ways, such as decluttering our homes, simplifying our schedules, or learning to appreciate what we have instead of constantly striving for more, we can begin to find contentment in the present moment. A Buddhist perspective on contentment teaches us that happiness does not come from acquiring more, but from appreciating what we already have. The importance of reducing desires is not just about external possessions or experiences, but also about calming the mind and finding peace within. Buddhism teaches that the mind is constantly in motion, perpetually jumping from thought to thought, desire to desire, creating restlessness and confusion. By practicing mindfulness, we can begin to quiet the mind and reduce the mental clutter that causes stress and anxiety. Meditation, a key Buddhist practice, is a tool that can help us cultivate inner simplicity. Through meditation, we learn to observe our thoughts without attachment, recognizing that they are transient and not who we truly are. Over time, as we practice mindfulness and meditation, we can cultivate a mind that is more peaceful, focused, and content, free from the constant pull of desire. A modern example of this practice can be seen in the life of the well-known Buddhist monk and teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh often spoke about the importance of simplicity in both our actions and thoughts. He encouraged his followers to cultivate a habit of mindfulness in everything they do, from walking to eating to simply being present with others. In his teachings, he emphasized the idea of engaged Buddhism, which involves applying mindfulness and simplicity in everyday life to reduce suffering and promote peace. For Thich Nhat Hanh, simplicity was not about renouncing the world, but about engaging with it in a mindful and intentional way, free from distractions and desires. One of his stories illustrates this beautifully. During a retreat, a group of practitioners was sitting in meditation when a loud noise from a construction site nearby interrupted their peace. While most of the group became irritated or distracted by the noise, Thich Nhat Hanh smiled and said, "This is the sound of the bell of mindfulness." In that moment, he demonstrated how one can cultivate contentment and peace not by avoiding distractions or desires, but by accepting them fully and embracing the present moment. This attitude of mindful acceptance, rather than resistance, is at the heart of Buddhist simplicity. It is about letting go of the need for things to be different and finding peace in what is. In our modern world, we can integrate the lessons of simplicity and reduce desire into our daily routines by finding moments of stillness amidst the chaos. Simple practices like taking time to breathe deeply, focusing on the task at hand, or even appreciating the simple beauty of nature can help us reconnect with the present moment. For instance, if we find ourselves overwhelmed with a busy schedule, we might pause and ask ourselves, "What truly matters right now? What can I let go of?" By simplifying our choices, we reduce the pressure and stress of constantly having to do more, and we create space for contentment and peace. Buddhist teachings on simplicity also encourage us to cultivate gratitude. By recognizing and appreciating the small, everyday moments, the warmth of a cup of tea, the sound of birdsong, the love of a friend, we can find joy in life's simplicity. This mindset shifts our focus away from what we lack to what we already have, fostering a deeper sense of contentment. Ultimately, the Buddhist path to simplicity is about reducing the mental and emotional clutter that keeps us from experiencing the fullness of life. By letting go of excessive desires, simplifying our possessions and schedules, and cultivating mindfulness in our actions, we can find true contentment. In a world that constantly urges us to chase after more, Buddhism offers a powerful reminder that happiness does not lie in accumulation, but in appreciating the simple, fleeting moments of life. When we embrace simplicity, we open ourselves to a deeper sense of peace and joy, allowing us to experience life as it truly is, impermanent, beautiful, and full of potential. Gratitude, often described as the practice of recognizing and appreciating the good things in life, is one of the most powerful tools we can use to enhance emotional resilience. In the face of challenges, setbacks, and even adversity, cultivating gratitude can shift our perspective, helping us find peace and strength. From a Buddhist perspective, gratitude is not just an emotional response, but a practice that can fundamentally alter how we experience the world. It helps us to recognize the impermanent nature of life and to accept both its joys and its sorrows with an open heart. When we cultivate gratitude, we become more attuned to the present moment, letting go of desires for things that we do not have and embracing the abundance of what is already here. One of the foundational teachings in Buddhism is the idea of impermanence, anicca, which reminds us that everything in life is constantly changing. This includes our experiences of happiness and suffering. When we face hardships, it is easy to become consumed by feelings of frustration, loss, or disappointment. We may find ourselves focusing on what is lacking, what has gone wrong, or what we wish was different. However, gratitude helps us shift our focus. Rather than dwelling on what is missing, it encourages us to appreciate what we have, no matter how small or fleeting it may seem. In this way, gratitude helps us build emotional resilience, as it fosters a mindset that is not dependent on external circumstances, but grounded in an inner sense of contentment. In Buddhist teachings, one of the key practices for developing gratitude is mindful reflection. This involves taking time each day to reflect on the things we are grateful for, whether they are big or small. It might be the kindness of a friend, the beauty of nature, or the simple act of breathing. In the midst of challenges, this practice encourages us to pause, reflect, and recognize the moments of goodness that continue to exist in our lives. For example, during difficult times, one might take a moment to appreciate the support of loved ones or the opportunity to learn from adversity. By turning our attention to these sources of gratitude, we shift our emotional state, increasing our capacity to cope with stress and adversity. A well-known Buddhist story that illustrates the power of gratitude is the story of the Buddha's encounter with Angulimala. Angulimala was a notorious bandit who had killed many people, but when he encountered the Buddha, he was struck by his calm presence and profound compassion. Despite his violent past, Angulimala approached the Buddha, seeking redemption. The Buddha, recognizing the potential for transformation within him, expressed gratitude toward Angulimala for his willingness to seek a new path. Angulimala, deeply moved by the Buddha's words and actions, was able to let go of his violent tendencies and eventually become a monk. This story highlights how gratitude can change our perception of even the most difficult situations, and how it can transform both our relationships and ourselves. Another example of how gratitude can transform emotional resilience comes from the life of the famous Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is known for his teachings on mindfulness and the importance of being present in the moment. He often spoke about the practice of deep listening and loving speech, both of which are rooted in gratitude. By taking the time to deeply listen to others and to speak with kindness, we can cultivate stronger relationships and a greater sense of connection with those around us. Thich Nhat Hanh also emphasized the power of gratitude in transforming difficult emotions. In one of his teachings, he described how, when faced with a challenging or painful situation, we can pause and acknowledge the good in our lives, no matter how small. This practice helps us detach from the negative emotions that may arise and instead cultivate a sense of calm and appreciation. For example, in moments of stress or conflict, he suggested pausing to take a deep breath, appreciating the fact that we are alive and capable of engaging with the present moment. This practice of gratitude, when cultivated regularly, can build emotional resilience, making us less reactive and more able to handle the ups and downs of life with equanimity. In addition to enhancing emotional resilience, gratitude also strengthens our relationships with others. When we express appreciation for the people in our lives, whether through words, actions, or gestures, we create an atmosphere of kindness and mutual respect. In Buddhist practice, the cultivation of loving kindness, metta, and compassion, karuna, is closely linked to gratitude. By recognizing the goodness in others and expressing our thanks for their presence and support, we create a cycle of positivity that strengthens both our emotional well-being and our relationships. For example, in a family setting, expressing gratitude for the efforts and kindness of family members can foster a deeper sense of connection and understanding. In a work environment, showing appreciation for colleagues can lead to greater teamwork and collaboration, reducing stress and improving morale. Gratitude also has the power to transform our approach to failure. In Buddhism, the concept of dukkha acknowledges that life is full of challenges, difficulties, and suffering. However, rather than seeing failure or adversity as something to be feared or avoided, Buddhist teachings encourage us to embrace these experiences as opportunities for growth and learning. When we approach setbacks with a sense of gratitude, we can reframe them as valuable lessons. For instance, if we fail to achieve a goal or experience a personal setback, we might take a moment to reflect on what we learned from the experience and how it has contributed to our personal development. This shift in perspective, made possible by the practice of gratitude, enables us to navigate difficult situations with greater resilience and equanimity. One of the key benefits of gratitude is its ability to improve our overall mental health. Studies have shown that practicing gratitude can lead to increased levels of happiness, reduced symptoms of depression, and greater life satisfaction. From a Buddhist standpoint, gratitude helps us connect with the fundamental truth that life is a gift and that every moment is precious. Whether we are experiencing joy or suffering, we can choose to appreciate the present moment for what it is, without clinging to the past or worrying about the future. In this way, gratitude serves as a powerful antidote to the anxiety and dissatisfaction that often arise from attachment and craving. In Buddhist meditation practices, cultivating gratitude is often incorporated into the metta bhavana, loving kindness meditation, and vipassana, insight meditation. During these practices, practitioners reflect on the blessings in their lives and send out thoughts of love and appreciation to themselves, their loved ones, and even to those with whom they have difficult relationships. By doing so, they strengthen their emotional resilience, develop compassion, and cultivate a deep sense of inner peace. This form of meditation can help us develop a profound appreciation for the interconnectedness of all beings, fostering a sense of gratitude not just for what we have, but for the entire web of life that sustains us. Ultimately, the practice of gratitude is not just a temporary mood booster, but a way of life. By making gratitude a regular part of our spiritual practice and daily routine, we can transform our emotional resilience, improve our relationships, and find greater peace in the present moment. Gratitude teaches us to appreciate life's fleeting nature and to embrace both the joy and sorrow that come with it. When we recognize the goodness in our lives, no matter how small, we begin to see the beauty in all things and develop a deep sense of contentment and peace. Through gratitude, we learn that true happiness is not something to be pursued, but something that can be cultivated from within. Self-awareness is one of the core components of Buddhist practice, as it enables individuals to understand their internal state and emotional responses with clarity and insight. The more self-aware we are, the more we can observe our thoughts, emotions, and actions without becoming entangled in them. This awareness allows us to respond to situations with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom rather than reacting impulsively or out of habitual patterns. In Buddhism, this practice of developing awareness is often referred to as mindfulness, sati, and it is seen as the path to liberating the mind from the suffering caused by ignorance, attachment, and aversion. At the heart of Buddhist teachings is the idea that most of our suffering arises from our inability to recognize the impermanent and interconnected nature of all things. We react to situations based on past conditioning, desires, fears, or attachments, without taking the time to reflect on the deeper causes and effects of our actions. Buddhist practices, particularly meditation, help us cultivate self-awareness by encouraging us to slow down, observe our thoughts and feelings, and recognize their fleeting nature. Through this practice, we develop the ability to pause before reacting, to observe the rising of emotions, and to choose a response that aligns with our higher intentions rather than one driven by impulsive urges. In Buddhist meditation practices, such as vipassana, insight meditation, practitioners cultivate a deep awareness of their body, thoughts, and emotions. The goal is not to suppress or deny emotions, but to observe them with equanimity, without judgment, attachment, or aversion. As the meditator becomes more attuned to their internal state, they begin to notice the patterns and triggers that lead to certain emotional reactions. For example, one might notice that feelings of frustration arise when they encounter obstacles at work, or that irritation builds when someone cuts in front of them in line. Instead of reacting impulsively to these situations, perhaps through anger or annoyance, the practitioner learns to take a step back and observe the feelings as they arise, understanding that they are impermanent and do not define the self. This process of observing emotions without identifying with them is a transformative practice that helps us respond to life's challenges with greater thoughtfulness. When we are more aware of our emotional triggers, we can prevent reactive behavior that often leads to regret or conflict. For instance, consider a scenario where a person feels criticized by a colleague at work. Without self-awareness, they may respond with defensiveness or anger, escalating the situation. However, if they have cultivated mindfulness, they might recognize the feeling of hurt arising in their body and mind, take a moment to breathe, and allow themselves time to reflect before responding. This pause allows them to discern the most skillful and compassionate response, whether it is to engage in a constructive conversation, to let go of the criticism, or to seek clarification without reacting from a place of defensiveness. In this way, self-awareness helps us make more thoughtful decisions, both in our personal lives and in our interactions with others. The Buddha himself emphasized the importance of self-awareness in his teachings on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. In particular, the practice of right mindfulness, part of the Eightfold Path, is central to understanding and transforming our emotional responses. Right mindfulness involves being fully aware of our thoughts, words, and actions, and understanding their impact on ourselves and others. It is through this awareness that we begin to see the true nature of our experiences and break free from the habitual reactions that bind us to suffering. By cultivating mindfulness in daily life, we can begin to recognize the subtle ways in which our emotions influence our thoughts and behaviors, and we can choose to respond in ways that promote peace and harmony. One well-known Buddhist story that illustrates the power of self-awareness comes from the life of the Buddha himself. One day, the Buddha was walking through a village when a man named Kunda approached him with harsh words. Kunda, angered by the Buddha's teachings, insulted him in front of a crowd. Instead of reacting with anger or retaliation, the Buddha responded with profound calm and compassion, simply saying, "I do not take offense at what you say, for I know the nature of the mind." His ability to remain calm and composed in the face of provocation demonstrates the power of self-awareness in cultivating equanimity. The Buddha did not allow Kunda's words to trigger an emotional reaction. Instead, he remained grounded in his understanding of the impermanent nature of both the insults and his own emotional state. This story teaches us that, when we are self-aware, we can maintain peace and clarity even in the midst of external challenges. In addition to mindfulness meditation, another practice in Buddhism that fosters self-awareness is contemplation. The Buddha encouraged his followers to engage in deep reflection on the nature of the mind, particularly its tendencies to grasp at pleasure, avoid pain, and cling to self-identity. Through contemplation, individuals can begin to see how these tendencies drive their emotional responses and lead to suffering. By recognizing the causes of their reactions, they can learn to let go of attachments and aversions, leading to a greater sense of freedom and inner peace. For example, imagine a person who feels an overwhelming desire for approval from others. This craving may lead them to go to great lengths to gain the favor of friends or colleagues, even at the expense of their own well-being. Through self-awareness and contemplation, this individual might come to understand that their desire for approval is rooted in fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, and fear of being alone. By recognizing this fear, they can begin to loosen their attachment to the need for approval, allowing themselves to act authentically without seeking external validation. This self-awareness leads to greater emotional resilience, as the person no longer depends on the fleeting approval of others to feel worthy or secure. Another example of how self-awareness can prevent reactive behavior can be found in the story of a well-known Zen master, Hakuin. One day, a young woman in his village accused him of getting her pregnant, a claim that was untrue. Instead of reacting with anger or defending his reputation, Hakuin remained silent and simply said, "Is that so?" When the child was born, the woman brought the baby to Hakuin, demanding that he take responsibility for it. Hakuin calmly accepted the child and took care of it, demonstrating the importance of not reacting impulsively. Eventually, the truth came to light, and the woman confessed to her false accusation. Hakuin's response shows the power of self-awareness in preventing rash reactions. By remaining calm and centered, he avoided unnecessary conflict and maintained his peace of mind, illustrating the Buddhist teaching that true wisdom lies in responding thoughtfully rather than reacting out of fear, anger, or defensiveness. Through the practice of self-awareness, we also learn to develop a deep sense of self-compassion. In Buddhism, self-compassion is not about indulging in self-pity or avoiding responsibility, but about recognizing our own suffering with kindness and understanding. When we are aware of our emotions, we can more easily identify when we are being hard on ourselves and respond with gentleness. For instance, if we make a mistake at work, instead of berating ourselves, we can recognize the mistake with clarity, acknowledge that we are only human, and then take appropriate action to learn from the experience. Self-awareness allows us to approach ourselves with the same compassion and understanding that we would offer to a close friend. In conclusion, self-awareness is a cornerstone of Buddhist practice because it empowers us to understand our emotional triggers, observe our reactions without attachment, and respond with mindfulness and wisdom. Through practices like meditation, contemplation, and mindfulness, we develop the ability to pause, reflect, and choose how to engage with the world in a way that aligns with our higher values. By cultivating self-awareness, we free ourselves from the patterns of reactive behavior that often lead to suffering, and we learn to navigate life's challenges with greater clarity, compassion, and equanimity. Ultimately, self-awareness is not just a practice, but a way of living that allows us to respond to every moment with wisdom and peace. In Buddhist teachings, true happiness is understood as an internal state that arises from within the mind, rather than something that can be acquired from external sources. The Buddha emphasized that all things in the world are impermanent and that attachment to external objects, achievements, or validation from others often leads to suffering. The desire for external approval, material success, or the accumulation of wealth can never provide lasting satisfaction because these external conditions are fleeting and often beyond our control. Instead, the Buddha advocated for the cultivation of inner peace, mindfulness, and contentment, qualities that are within our reach, no matter the circumstances around us. This chapter will explore how one can seek joy and fulfillment from within, drawing upon Buddhist wisdom and stories of those who have embodied this path. The Buddha's teachings on happiness are rooted in the concept of suffering, dukkha, which is not just the experience of physical pain, but also the dissatisfaction that arises when we grasp at things that are transient. The Buddha identified craving and clinging as the root causes of this suffering, noting that our tendency to depend on external sources for joy only deepens our unhappiness. For instance, we might seek happiness by accumulating wealth, seeking praise, or trying to fit in with societal expectations. However, such sources of happiness are unreliable. They can be taken away, they can change, or they may not live up to our expectations. According to the Buddha, by training our minds and focusing on internal sources of fulfillment, we can transcend the cycle of craving and develop a profound sense of joy that does not depend on external conditions. A central aspect of finding internal joy in Buddhism is the practice of mindfulness, particularly the ability to focus on the present moment. Mindfulness allows us to let go of our attachment to past regrets or future anxieties, and instead immerse ourselves in the current experience. Whether we are eating, walking, or simply breathing, mindfulness brings us back to the present moment and helps us appreciate life as it is, rather than constantly striving for something more. This is in stark contrast to the common tendency to look outward for satisfaction, whether that's through possessions, status, or the approval of others. When we turn inward and cultivate mindfulness, we can discover a deep sense of contentment with whatever is happening right now. One of the key ways Buddhist practice helps us tap into this internal source of joy is through meditation. Meditation teaches us to quiet the mind, free it from the clutter of external desires, and become attuned to the inner peace that lies within. In sitting meditation, for example, we allow our thoughts to come and go without judgment, simply observing them as they arise and pass away. This practice fosters a deep sense of acceptance, as we learn to observe our desires without becoming caught up in them. In the stillness of meditation, we begin to realize that we are not our thoughts, emotions, or external circumstances. We are the awareness behind them, the unchanging essence of who we are. This realization can profoundly shift how we relate to the world and to ourselves. We begin to see that external achievements or recognition do not define our worth. Instead, we find joy in simply being present, being mindful, and being at peace with ourselves. A famous Buddhist story that illustrates this concept is that of the Zen master Hakuin. One day, a young woman in the village accused him of being the father of her child, which was a lie. Hakuin did not react with anger or frustration. Instead, he simply responded with calmness. "Is that so?" When the child was brought to him, he accepted the responsibility and raised the child with love and care. Later, when the truth came out and the woman confessed to the false accusation, Hakuin simply returned to his life, unchanged by the external events. This story shows the importance of being grounded in internal peace, not allowing external circumstances or opinions to disturb our sense of fulfillment. Buddhist teachings also emphasize the idea of non-attachment, letting go of our attachment to outcomes, people, and possessions. Non-attachment does not mean indifference or a lack of care. Rather, it is the ability to enjoy the present moment without becoming overly fixated on what we have or do not have. The Buddha taught that when we are attached to things, we are bound to suffer when those things change or are taken away. For example, many people attach their happiness to their career or social status. If their career is going well, they feel happy, but if they face a setback or lose their job, they feel devastated. Similarly, some people may attach their happiness to the approval of others, feeling validated only when they are praised or recognized. However, these sources of joy are temporary, as they are contingent upon external circumstances that are always changing. Through meditation and mindfulness, we can cultivate an attitude of non-attachment and begin to shift our focus from external validation to internal fulfillment. We learn to enjoy life as it is, without clinging to the need for more or better. For instance, consider a person who feels fulfilled not because of a promotion at work, but because they find joy in the process of their work itself. They may not be recognized by others, but their sense of satisfaction comes from the knowledge that they are doing their best and living with integrity. This person is not dependent on external praise or success to feel valued. Instead, they derive joy from the intrinsic satisfaction of knowing they are aligned with their own values and purpose. One well-known Buddhist story that highlights the importance of letting go of external validation is that of the Buddha's encounter with Mara, the personification of temptation and distraction. While meditating under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha was tempted by Mara, who sent various distractions and fears to disturb him. Mara even tried to dissuade the Buddha by offering him power and control over the world, but the Buddha remained unmoved. He realized that the pursuit of power, wealth, or fame would never lead to true fulfillment, and instead, he focused on the path to enlightenment. Mara's external temptations were of no value to the Buddha because he had already found the inner peace and wisdom that came from self-realization. The Buddha's detachment from external validation allowed him to remain focused on his true purpose, finding enlightenment and helping others find the same. In our own lives, we can begin to cultivate this inner peace and fulfillment by reflecting on where we are seeking validation from others and whether those sources truly provide lasting joy. It may be helpful to ask ourselves, what are we attached to? Do we seek approval from our friends, family, or colleagues? Do we tie our self-worth to our material possessions or social standing? By honestly examining these questions, we can begin to identify where we are relying on external sources for happiness. We can then take steps to turn inward and develop a deeper connection with ourselves. One practical way to foster internal sources of joy is to create a daily practice of gratitude. In Buddhism, gratitude is seen as a powerful antidote to dissatisfaction and longing. By focusing on what we have, rather than what we lack, we shift our attention away from external desires and appreciate the abundance that already exists in our lives. Taking a moment each day to express gratitude for the simple things, our health, our relationships, the beauty of nature, can help us cultivate a sense of contentment that does not rely on external validation. In conclusion, the Buddhist path encourages us to seek joy and fulfillment from within, rather than relying on external validation or material possessions. Through mindfulness, meditation, and the practice of non-attachment, we can discover a deep sense of inner peace and contentment that does not depend on external conditions. By letting go of our attachment to outcomes, achievements, and the approval of others, we free ourselves from the cycle of craving and suffering. As we cultivate internal sources of joy, we come to realize that true happiness is not something to be pursued or acquired, but something that arises naturally when we are at peace with ourselves and the world around us. At its core, letting go in Buddhism is about non-attachment, a central teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha understood that suffering arises from our attachment to things, whether they are people, possessions, or even experiences. When we cling to something, believing that it will bring us lasting happiness, we set ourselves up for disappointment. Life, as the Buddha taught, is impermanent and constantly changing, and anything we attach ourselves to can be taken away. By learning to release our attachments, we can face life's inevitable changes with grace and equanimity, avoiding the turmoil that often comes when things do not go as we expect. Letting go does not mean renouncing the world or abandoning relationships. It is not about withdrawing from life or living in isolation. Instead, it is the practice of holding things lightly, allowing them to come and go naturally without clinging to them. In Buddhism, attachment is seen as a source of suffering, but detachment is not the same as indifference. It is not about disconnecting from the world, but rather engaging with it in a way that is free from excessive desire or expectation. To illustrate this concept, consider the well-known story of the Buddha's encounter with a grieving woman named Kisa Gautami. Kisa Gautami's child had passed away, and she was inconsolable with grief. Desperate to bring him back to life, she sought the Buddha's help. The Buddha, understanding the nature of suffering and impermanence, told her to find a mustard seed from a household that had not experienced death. As she went from door to door, she found that every family had experienced the death of someone they loved. Eventually, Kisagami realized that death is a part of life, inevitable and inescapable. Through this realization, she was able to release her attachment to the idea of her son's return and find peace in the acceptance of life's impermanence. This story highlights the profound wisdom that comes with letting go of our attachments to people and outcomes. In practical terms, letting go can be experienced in our daily lives in many ways. Take, for example, the common attachment to a particular outcome in our personal or professional life. Suppose you invest a great deal of time and energy into a relationship or career, hoping that it will bring you happiness or fulfillment. The expectation that this one thing will make you happy can lead to disappointment if things do not unfold as planned. When you learn to let go of the need for a specific result, you begin to experience a shift in perspective. You realize that happiness is not something that can be obtained from external circumstances, but rather something that comes from within. By letting go of the pressure to control outcomes, you allow yourself the freedom to experience life as it is, without the constant anxiety of trying to force things to fit your expectations. Letting go can also have a transformative effect on relationships. In attachment-based relationships, people often place unrealistic expectations on each other, believing that their partner, friend, or family member must fulfill their emotional needs. When these expectations are not met, disappointment and resentment often arise. However, when we practice letting go, we begin to see others for who they truly are, without trying to mold them into what we want them to be. We no longer expect them to complete us or provide us with constant validation. This shift in perspective allows for more harmonious and authentic relationships, where love is given freely and without the expectation of something in return. A practical example of letting go can be seen in our modern attachment to technology. In a world where smartphones, social media, and constant connectivity are integral to daily life, many find themselves attached to their devices, seeking approval through likes, comments, and validation from others. This attachment to digital recognition can lead to anxiety, stress, and a diminished sense of self-worth. In Buddhism, the act of detaching from such external validation is essential for cultivating inner peace. By learning to disengage from the constant need for external validation, we can reclaim our attention, our time, and our peace of mind. A simple practice of reducing screen time, setting boundaries, or taking regular breaks from digital devices can allow us to reconnect with ourselves and with the present moment, fostering a sense of contentment that does not depend on external sources. In Buddhism, letting go is also linked to the practice of mindfulness, which helps us become more aware of the thoughts and emotions that arise in the mind. Often, we cling to negative emotions such as anger, jealousy, or fear, believing that they define us or that we must hold on to them. However, through mindfulness, we learn to observe these emotions without attaching to them. We begin to recognize that emotions, like all phenomena, are impermanent. When we stop clinging to them, they lose their power over us. This is the art of letting go, recognizing that we do not need to hold onto every thought or feeling that arises. By allowing our emotions to pass freely, we experience greater emotional resilience and peace. A profound example of this principle can be found in the life of the great Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh. He often spoke of the importance of embracing impermanence and letting go of attachments in order to cultivate peace. In one of his teachings, Thich Nhat Hanh described the act of breathing as an example of letting go. With each inhale, we take in life. With each exhale, we release everything that no longer serves us. In this way, letting go becomes a natural part of our existence. Like breathing, it is a continual process of release and renewal. Through the practice of letting go, we come to understand that true freedom does not come from acquiring more or holding on to what we have, but from releasing our grip on the things we think we need. The Buddha's teachings remind us that everything in life is impermanent, and when we accept this truth, we free ourselves from the fear and anxiety of losing what we hold dear. In embracing detachment, we find the inner peace that comes from accepting the flow of life as it is, without resistance. In conclusion, the art of letting go is a cornerstone of Buddhist practice and a powerful tool for cultivating inner peace. It is not about abandoning our lives or relationships, but about releasing the mental and emotional attachments that cause us suffering. Through mindfulness, meditation, and non-attachment, we can learn to face life's inevitable changes with equanimity and find peace in the present moment. As we let go of our desire to control outcomes, we discover that true happiness and fulfillment come not from external sources, but from the freedom of a mind that is unburdened and at peace. Letting go is the path to liberation, allowing us to live fully and authentically, free from the constraints of expectation and attachment. Compassion is a cornerstone of Buddhism, and its practice is essential for creating a meaningful and connected life. In Buddhist teachings, compassion goes beyond merely feeling sympathy for others. It is the active practice of understanding and sharing in their suffering, as well as offering kindness and empathy in both thought and action. The Buddha taught that by cultivating compassion, we can transform ourselves and our relationships, allowing us to approach the world with open hearts, regardless of the circumstances we face. This chapter will explore how to develop compassion for others, especially those with whom we may have little in common or with whom we struggle to empathize. The practice of compassion starts with understanding that all beings, like ourselves, seek happiness and want to avoid suffering. The Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths emphasize that suffering is an inherent part of life, but it is also through compassion that we can alleviate that suffering. Compassion allows us to see the humanity in others, even when their actions or behavior might seem difficult to understand. When we open our hearts to others' pain, we not only relieve their burden, but we also open the door to our own emotional healing. A practical example of cultivating compassion can be found in our interactions with others in everyday life. Take, for instance, a situation where a friend or colleague does something that frustrates or upsets you. It's easy to react with anger or resentment, especially when we feel wronged. However, the Buddhist approach encourages us to pause and reflect on the circumstances that might be influencing the other person's behavior. Perhaps they are going through personal struggles or are facing challenges that you are unaware of. In such moments, instead of responding with judgment, we can choose to respond with compassion. By putting ourselves in their shoes, we begin to realize that their actions are not directed at us personally, but are a reflection of their own suffering. This shift in perspective can transform a negative interaction into an opportunity for connection. Showing kindness and understanding in these situations not only helps the other person feel seen and supported, but also promotes our own peace of mind. Instead of holding on to anger or frustration, we experience the joy that comes from being kind and generous with our emotions. The Buddha once said, If you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your own path. By offering compassion to others, we illuminate our own hearts and minds, cultivating a sense of inner calm and fulfillment. Compassion also extends to those with whom we may have little empathy or understanding. In Buddhist practice, compassion is not limited to those who are easy to love or those who share our worldview. It is an unconditional love that transcends differences, whether they be cultural, social, or personal. The Buddha's teachings encourage us to develop compassion for all beings, even those who may have hurt us or acted in ways we find difficult to comprehend. Consider the famous story of the Buddha's encounter with Angulimala, a notorious bandit who had killed many people. Angulimala was feared by all, and his reputation for violence was widespread. When the Buddha encountered him, Angulimala attempted to kill the Buddha as part of his violent practice. However, the Buddha, in his boundless compassion, spoke to Angulimala with kindness, refusing to react with anger or fear. Instead, the Buddha recognized Angulimala's deep suffering and the pain that had driven him to commit his heinous acts. Through their conversation, Angulimala was transformed, realizing the path he was on would only lead to more suffering, and he ultimately renounced his violent ways and sought refuge in the Buddha's teachings. This powerful story illustrates that even the most hardened hearts can be softened by compassion. The Buddha saw through Angulimala's actions to the underlying suffering that caused them, and by offering him compassion, he helped guide Angulimala toward redemption. In our own lives, when we encounter individuals whose behavior we find difficult or even harmful, we can reflect on the possibility that their actions stem from their own pain, fear, or ignorance. Responding with compassion rather than condemnation allows us to break the cycle of negativity and build a bridge of understanding. Moreover, cultivating compassion also involves showing kindness toward ourselves. In Buddhism, compassion is not limited to others. It must first be directed inward. We must learn to forgive ourselves, accept our flaws, and treat ourselves with the same kindness we offer to others. When we are compassionate toward ourselves, we are better equipped to extend that same compassion to others. This practice of self-compassion helps to heal the wounds of our own suffering and allows us to move through life with greater peace and acceptance. A key element in cultivating compassion is mindfulness. Through mindfulness, we become more aware of our own thoughts, feelings, and reactions, allowing us to notice when we are being unkind or judgmental. Mindfulness also allows us to be present with others in a way that fosters deeper connections. By being truly present, we can listen to others with empathy and without judgment, creating a space for healing and understanding. The practice of compassion can be particularly powerful in the context of community. In Buddhist monastic life, compassion is an essential component of the Sangha, the community of practitioners. Monks and nuns live together in a spirit of mutual support and compassion, helping one another navigate the challenges of spiritual practice. This sense of collective compassion creates a space where everyone can grow and progress along the path to enlightenment. In the wider world, we can practice compassion by contributing to the well-being of others. Acts of kindness, no matter how small, ripple outward, creating a more compassionate society. Simple gestures, such as listening to someone who is suffering, offering help to those in need, or simply being present for others, can make a profound difference. These acts are not only beneficial to those who receive them, but also to those who give them. Each act of kindness strengthens our own hearts and builds a world where compassion thrives. In summary, the path of compassion is a central aspect of Buddhist practice and can deeply transform our lives. By cultivating empathy and kindness, we create a world where suffering is alleviated and connections are deepened. Compassion allows us to approach life with an open heart, seeing the pain in others and responding with understanding and love. It is a practice that can be developed daily, not just through grand gestures, but through small, mindful acts of kindness. Whether in our personal relationships, interactions with strangers, or in how we treat ourselves, the practice of compassion is the key to building a more harmonious and peaceful existence. Through the cultivation of compassion, we can learn to live with greater joy, resilience, and connection to all beings. Buddhism teaches that each of us is a unique and valuable being, worthy of love and respect, regardless of whether we are perfect or flawed. The core message is that imperfection is part of the human condition, and that true peace can only be found when we learn to accept ourselves fully, with all our strengths and weaknesses. In this chapter, we will explore the importance of self-acceptance in Buddhist practice, how it contributes to inner peace, and how we can cultivate a compassionate relationship with ourselves. Self-acceptance is a fundamental aspect of Buddhist teachings. The Buddha's path encourages individuals to embrace the impermanence of life, which includes the recognition that we, too, are impermanent and ever-changing. This means that we must be gentle with ourselves, understanding that mistakes, flaws, and weaknesses are not permanent marks of failure but part of the larger journey toward enlightenment. In Buddhism, the cultivation of self-compassion and acceptance is considered essential for spiritual progress. When we accept ourselves as we are, we create the space for growth, healing, and the development of positive qualities like kindness, patience, and humility. A powerful example of self-acceptance in Buddhist tradition can be found in the story of the monk Mahakassapa, one of the Buddha's closest disciples. Mahakassapa was known for his deep meditation and self-discipline, but he was not without imperfections. Despite being an accomplished monk, Mahakassapa struggled with feelings of inadequacy when he compared himself to others, particularly the Buddha himself. One day, the Buddha held a teaching in which he presented a simple flower to the assembly. Mahakassapa, understanding the silent teaching behind the gesture, smiled in recognition of the profound truth of impermanence and acceptance. His smile was a moment of self-realization, where he understood that he didn't need to be perfect or measure up to others to attain wisdom. The acceptance of his own unique path and imperfections allowed him to reach a profound state of peace and enlightenment. This story highlights that even the most revered spiritual figures face challenges in self-acceptance, and the key is not to suppress or deny our flaws, but to acknowledge and embrace them with understanding and kindness. In everyday life, many of us struggle with self-criticism, often magnifying our flaws and imperfections. We might criticize ourselves for our appearance, past failures, or the gap between our current reality and our aspirations. This constant self-judgment can create a deep sense of unworthiness, leading us to believe that we must be perfect to be loved or to succeed. However, Buddhism teaches that this desire for perfection is rooted in attachment, and it is precisely this attachment that causes suffering. When we let go of the need for perfection and accept ourselves as we are, we free ourselves from unnecessary pain and stress. Instead of focusing on what is wrong with us, we can shift our attention to what is right and valuable, cultivating a mindset of gratitude for who we are in the present moment. A relatable example is the experience of someone who struggles with body image. Many people, especially in today's society, feel pressured to conform to certain beauty standards, often resulting in feelings of inadequacy or self-hatred. This constant comparison to external standards can create an ongoing battle within, where self-worth is tied to meeting arbitrary expectations. Buddhist teachings offer a different approach by encouraging individuals to see beyond the surface and recognize the impermanence of physical appearance. The Buddha's teachings on the body as a transient and imperfect vessel invite us to focus on cultivating qualities like kindness, generosity, and wisdom rather than clinging to fleeting aspects like appearance. When we learn to love and accept our bodies as they are, we free ourselves from the shackles of self-judgment and embrace our imperfections as a natural part of our existence. The practice of self-acceptance in Buddhism also extends to our past mistakes and perceived failures. Often, we carry the weight of past actions, blaming ourselves for things that are long gone and beyond our control. In Buddhist philosophy, the idea of karma teaches that every action has consequences, but it also emphasizes the possibility of change. Our past mistakes do not define who we are in the present moment. Rather, it is our capacity to learn from them and grow that matters. Self-acceptance involves forgiving ourselves for past misdeeds, understanding that we are constantly evolving, and recognizing that the path to enlightenment is not about achieving perfection, but about striving to be better in each moment. For instance, consider someone who has made mistakes in relationships or career choices. They may feel guilty or regretful for the pain caused, which can prevent them from moving forward. Through self-acceptance, they can recognize that while their past actions were part of their journey, they have the ability to change and improve. By forgiving themselves, they can let go of the burden of guilt and embrace the present moment, where new opportunities for growth and healing await. The Buddha's teachings on mindfulness support this idea by encouraging us to be fully present with ourselves and our experiences, rather than getting stuck in the past or future. Through mindfulness, we can accept ourselves with all our flaws, knowing that we are constantly in the process of transformation. A well-known story that reflects the idea of self-acceptance is the tale of the Buddha's encounter with a woman named Kisagami. Kisagami had recently lost her child and was in deep sorrow. Desperate to find a remedy, she approached the Buddha for help. The Buddha asked her to find a mustard seed from a family that had not known death. After searching for this seed and realizing that every family had experienced loss, Kisagami returned to the Buddha with a new understanding. She recognized that death is part of the human experience and that her suffering was not unique but shared by all. This realization helped her accept the impermanence of life and her own grief, which eventually led to her peace and liberation. This story illustrates how accepting the inevitability of suffering and the impermanence of life can bring peace, allowing us to let go of attachments to our desires for control and perfection. Ultimately, self-acceptance in Buddhism is about developing a compassionate relationship with oneself. It is not about resigning to mediocrity, but about embracing our authentic selves with love and kindness. The practice of self-acceptance teaches us that we do not need to be perfect to be worthy of love, respect, or happiness. By letting go of the need to conform to unrealistic standards, and by accepting our strengths and weaknesses, we open ourselves up to deeper peace and fulfillment. We can begin to see ourselves through the lens of compassion, acknowledging our imperfections without judgment, and offering ourselves the same kindness that we extend to others. In doing so, we create a foundation for a life filled with greater love, joy, and contentment. In Buddhist philosophy, the concept of gratitude is closely tied to the teachings of mindfulness and impermanence. When we practice gratitude, we become more aware of the fleeting nature of all things. The Buddha's teachings emphasize that nothing in life is permanent, and this includes the things we often take for granted. By appreciating what we have in the present moment, we acknowledge its impermanent nature and make the most of it while we can. This practice is a form of living in harmony with the natural world, recognizing the preciousness of each moment as it is, without the need for attachment or expectation. One powerful story from Buddhist tradition that exemplifies the power of gratitude is the tale of the monk who was once a wealthy merchant. The merchant had everything he could desire: riches, a beautiful home, and a loving family. Yet, despite all his material wealth, he was often dissatisfied and unhappy, always craving more. One day, he encountered a Buddhist monk who was living a simple life with only the bare necessities. The monk's calmness and contentment struck the merchant, and he asked the monk, "How can you be so happy when you have nothing?" The monk replied, "I have nothing because I have everything I need. My happiness is not dependent on what I possess, but on my ability to appreciate what is already here." This encounter deeply moved the merchant, and he decided to renounce his wealth and become a monk himself. Through the practice of gratitude, he learned to find peace in the present moment and to appreciate the simple joys of life, realizing that true contentment does not come from accumulation, but from letting go of attachment and being grateful for the present. In daily life, the practice of gratitude can be transformative. It is easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle of life, constantly striving for more success, more possessions, more recognition. However, Buddhist teachings encourage us to pause and reflect on the countless blessings that already surround us. This practice does not mean ignoring challenges or difficulties, but rather recognizing that even in times of hardship, there are still things to be thankful for. Gratitude invites us to look at life through a lens of abundance rather than scarcity, fostering a sense of peace and contentment that arises from within, independent of external circumstances. A practical example of this can be seen in the way we deal with difficult situations. Imagine you've had a tough day, perhaps something didn't go as planned, or you faced challenges at work or in your personal life. Instead of ruminating on the negative events and allowing frustration to take hold, take a moment to reflect on the things you are grateful for. Maybe you have good health, a supportive family, or a roof over your head. Perhaps you can be grateful for the lessons learned from the difficulties you faced, or for the kindness you receive from others, even in small moments. By intentionally shifting your focus to gratitude, you begin to cultivate a positive outlook that can help you navigate through life's challenges with more resilience and peace. This practice of gratitude is also essential in Buddhist meditation, particularly in practices like metta, loving kindness, meditation, where one cultivates goodwill toward all beings. In metta meditation, gratitude is often included as part of the process of offering compassion and goodwill. By first acknowledging the blessings in our own lives, we open our hearts to others and can genuinely wish them well. Gratitude, therefore, serves as both a personal practice and a way to strengthen our connections with the world around us. It helps us see the interconnectedness of all beings and appreciate the goodness that exists in both our own lives and in the lives of others. One well-known Buddhist story that embodies the transformative power of gratitude is the story of the Buddha's encounter with a woman named Kunda. Kunda, a poor woman, invited the Buddha and his followers to her humble home for a meal. Despite her meager means, she offered what little she had with deep sincerity. The Buddha accepted her offer with gratitude, acknowledging the significance of her gesture, not the material value of the food. This story illustrates how gratitude transcends material wealth. It is the intention and heartfelt appreciation that matter most. Kunda's act of generosity was not defined by the quantity of her offering but by the love and compassion behind it. In this way, gratitude helps us see the goodness in every action, no matter how small, and teaches us to appreciate what we have rather than focusing on what we lack. In the context of personal relationships, gratitude also plays a crucial role in building deeper connections. Often, we may take those closest to us for granted, forgetting to express appreciation for their presence and support. The practice of gratitude helps us recognize the value of those relationships and cultivate a deeper sense of connection and love. When we practice gratitude, we acknowledge the efforts of others and the role they play in our lives, and this recognition fosters mutual respect and understanding. In the Buddhist tradition, the practice of dana, or giving, is not just about material generosity, but also about offering gratitude and kindness to others. By practicing dana, we cultivate a heart of compassion and humility, recognizing that everything we have is interconnected with others, and that the kindness we receive is a gift worth cherishing. Gratitude, according to Buddhism, is not just about feeling thankful in a fleeting moment, but about embodying a lifestyle of appreciation. It is about recognizing the inherent goodness in life, even amidst its struggles, and understanding that contentment is found in the simple act of being present with what is. The practice of gratitude encourages us to let go of the constant desire for more, the constant striving, and instead to find peace in what we already have. By doing so, we align ourselves more closely with the Buddhist path, which teaches that true happiness comes not from external circumstances, but from the cultivation of inner peace and contentment. In conclusion, the practice of gratitude is a profound and transformative tool for finding contentment in every moment. By appreciating the present, acknowledging the blessings we already have, and letting go of the desire for more, we can experience greater peace and happiness. Through gratitude, we connect more deeply with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us, fostering a sense of abundance and joy that arises from within. This practice, rooted in the teachings of the Buddha, encourages us to embrace the impermanence of life and to find contentment in the here and now. Buddhism teaches that patience is the key to perseverance and success. In this chapter, we will explore the importance of patience and how to face difficulties with a calm mind. Patience allows us to avoid reacting impulsively and helps us approach situations with deeper insight, thereby enabling us to make wiser and more grounded decisions. In a world that often values speed and instant results, Buddhism emphasizes the transformative power of patience and persistence in the face of life's inevitable challenges. The Buddha's teachings on patience are rooted in the understanding of impermanence and the nature of suffering. According to the Buddha, all experiences are transient, and every obstacle or hardship we face is temporary. However, it is our tendency to become frustrated or impatient that prolongs suffering. When we encounter difficulties, our immediate reaction may be to resist or to try to escape from them. However, by practicing patience, we learn to endure these challenges with composure, recognizing that they are part of the natural ebb and flow of life. In the same way that a river flows around obstacles, a patient mind navigates through adversity without becoming overwhelmed by it. One of the most well-known stories illustrating the power of patience in Buddhist tradition is that of the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. The Buddha, after years of seeking truth and understanding, sat under the Bodhi tree and vowed not to rise until he had achieved enlightenment. As he meditated, Mara, the demon of illusion, attempted to distract and disturb him, sending various temptations and challenges to break his concentration. Despite the intense suffering and challenges Mara presented, the Buddha remained steadfast in his meditation, demonstrating profound patience and inner calm. It was through this patience, this unwavering commitment to remain still amidst the chaos, that the Buddha achieved enlightenment. This story is not just about spiritual awakening, but also about the power of patience and persistence in the face of obstacles. In daily life, patience can be seen as the ability to face frustration and adversity without giving in to negative emotions. Take the example of a student struggling to learn a new skill. They may feel disheartened when progress seems slow, or when they encounter repeated failures. The natural inclination might be to give up, to feel that success is out of reach. However, by practicing patience, the student learns that mastery comes with time and consistent effort. Just as a seed takes time to grow into a tree, skill and wisdom develop gradually, and perseverance is required to stay on the path even when results are not immediately visible. The ability to persist, to continue the effort with patience, is what eventually leads to success. In Buddhism, patience is also tied to the practice of mindfulness. By cultivating mindfulness, we become more aware of our thoughts and reactions, allowing us to pause and reflect before responding to a situation. For example, when faced with a stressful situation, instead of reacting impulsively, a mindful person takes a moment to breathe and observe their emotions. This pause creates space for patience to arise. In this space, we can choose a more thoughtful and measured response, rather than being driven by automatic reactions. Through mindfulness, patience becomes a natural outcome as we train ourselves to remain grounded and centered even in the midst of difficulty. A beautiful Buddhist parable that illustrates this teaching is the story of the bamboo tree. The bamboo tree is known for its remarkable growth pattern. When a bamboo seed is planted, it does not show any visible growth for several years. During this time, the tree's roots are growing deep into the soil, preparing the foundation for its future growth. After several years, the bamboo suddenly begins to grow at an astonishing rate, reaching heights of 80 feet in a matter of weeks. The lesson here is that while there may be no visible progress in the beginning, the patience to endure the process allows for eventual growth and success. The bamboo's deep roots represent the foundation of patience and persistence, and the sudden growth symbolizes the rewards that come after time and effort. Patience is also important in our relationships with others. Often, we may become frustrated or upset with people, especially when they do not meet our expectations or when misunderstandings arise. In these moments, it is easy to react impulsively and let emotions dictate our behavior. However, practicing patience in relationships helps us respond with understanding and compassion rather than anger. When we cultivate patience, we allow others the space to be themselves, knowing that just as we have our struggles and imperfections, so do they. Through patience, we are able to see beyond the surface and connect with others on a deeper level, fostering harmony and mutual respect. One example of this is the famous Buddhist story of the disciple who asked the Buddha for guidance on how to deal with anger. The Buddha told him a story of a farmer who had to deal with a stubborn ox that would not cooperate. The farmer, rather than reacting with frustration or violence, showed patience, gently guiding the ox and allowing it to learn at its own pace. Through this patience, the ox gradually became more cooperative. The lesson was clear. Just as patience is required to deal with an ox, so too is it necessary when dealing with difficult emotions like anger. By practicing patience with our emotions and with others, we cultivate peace and understanding. Patience is not about passivity or complacency. It is an active practice of perseverance and trust. In Buddhism, we are taught that while we must exert effort to cultivate virtues such as compassion, wisdom, and mindfulness, we must also trust the process and allow things to unfold in their own time. Patience teaches us to accept that we cannot control every outcome or force things to happen according to our desires. Instead, we must trust in the natural order of things and have faith that with effort and persistence, the results will come in their own time. This deep trust in the unfolding of life is central to Buddhist teachings on non-attachment and the importance of living in harmony with the flow of existence. Another story that emphasizes the value of patience is the tale of the Buddha's encounter with Angulimala, a notorious criminal who had killed many people. When Angulimala met the Buddha, he tried to intimidate him, but the Buddha remained calm and compassionate, never reacting to Angulimala's threats. Angulimala, seeing the Buddha's unwavering composure, was struck by his patience and peacefulness. This encounter eventually led Angulimala to renounce his violent ways and seek refuge in the Buddha's teachings. This story exemplifies how patience, when paired with compassion, can transform even the most hardened of hearts. In conclusion, patience and persistence are integral to the Buddhist path. By cultivating patience, we learn to face life's challenges with a calm and open mind, trusting in the process of growth and transformation. Patience is not simply about waiting for things to happen, but about actively engaging in life with a sense of perseverance and trust. Through patience, we can overcome obstacles, navigate difficulties with grace, and ultimately find peace and fulfillment. Like the Buddha's enlightenment, true success is not about avoiding challenges, but about facing them with unwavering patience and persistence, knowing that each step brings us closer to wisdom and inner peace. In Buddhist philosophy, this is encapsulated in the concept of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. It refers to the compassionate wish to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. This altruistic intention goes beyond self-centered liberation and emphasizes the importance of extending compassion and wisdom to others. Once we achieve inner peace, we naturally want to share this gift with others, guiding them toward their own peace and understanding. One of the key aspects of Buddhism is the practice of compassion, karuna, and loving kindness, metta. These teachings emphasize that true peace is not achieved in isolation, but in connection with others. When we cultivate inner peace, we develop the capacity to be more empathetic and understanding towards others. This deep understanding of human suffering, combined with the wisdom gained from our own experiences, allows us to offer support in ways that are truly meaningful. Whether through a kind word, a listening ear, or an offer of guidance, we can help others navigate their struggles with a greater sense of peace and clarity. An inspiring example of this can be seen in the life of the great Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. His teachings on mindfulness and peace resonated with millions worldwide. He encouraged people to find peace in every moment, no matter how challenging life may seem. One of his most notable teachings was the practice of Engaged Buddhism, which emphasizes the importance of not only cultivating inner peace, but also using that peace to bring about positive change in the world. Thich Nhat Hanh's commitment to peace and his actions in spreading this message to the world showed how inner peace can be a powerful tool for social transformation. He encouraged people to share their wisdom and practice in their communities, thereby creating a collective sense of peace and harmony. Similarly, the Dalai Lama is another living embodiment of the Buddhist ideal of sharing wisdom with others. His tireless work in spreading compassion and kindness, especially in the face of adversity, is a testament to the transformative power of inner peace. The Dalai Lama teaches that our primary responsibility is to cultivate happiness and peace within ourselves, and only when we do so can we effectively help others. He often emphasizes that the true measure of our spiritual practice lies in how we treat others, whether we can offer compassion, patience, and understanding even when faced with difficulty. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a story of a monk named Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Avalokiteshvara is often depicted with many arms and heads, symbolizing his ability to reach out in all directions to help those in need. His compassion is boundless, and he serves as an example of how one's personal liberation can be dedicated to helping others. Avalokiteshvara's compassion is not passive, it is active, reaching out to alleviate the suffering of others and helping them find peace. This story illustrates that the act of sharing wisdom and offering peace to others is not only an act of kindness, but also an essential aspect of the path to enlightenment. Sharing wisdom and peace with others is also a form of selfless service, seva, which is highly valued in Buddhist practice. By serving others with love and compassion, we transcend the ego and connect with something greater than ourselves. The act of sharing wisdom is not about gaining recognition or praise, but rather about making the world a better place for all. Through selfless service, we create a harmonious society where everyone can experience the peace and happiness that we ourselves have cultivated. The Buddha's teachings on generosity, dana, further reinforce this idea, reminding us that when we share our resources, our time, or our wisdom with others, we create a ripple effect of positive energy that spreads far beyond ourselves. Practically, sharing wisdom with others can take many forms. When a friend or family member is facing difficulties, you can offer them the methods you've learned from Buddhism, such as mindful breathing, meditation, or compassionate listening. Sometimes, it's simply being present for someone who is going through a tough time. You don't always have to offer solutions or advice. Often, just showing up with a calm and compassionate presence can make all the difference. In these moments, you become a vessel through which peace can flow to others. By embodying the qualities of patience, understanding, and empathy that Buddhism teaches, you can inspire others to find peace within themselves as well. In another Buddhist story, there is the tale of the Buddha's encounter with a man named Angulimala, who had killed many people. When Angulimala met the Buddha, he was ready to kill him as well. But the Buddha, instead of reacting with fear or anger, spoke to Angulimala with deep compassion, seeing the suffering that lay behind his violent actions. Through their interaction, Angulimala was moved and ultimately renounced his violent ways, seeking refuge in the Buddha's teachings. This story exemplifies how the peaceful wisdom of the Buddha, shared with another, can transform lives. The Buddha's example shows that by embodying peace and compassion, we can help others find their way back to harmony, no matter how lost they may seem. When we practice Buddhism, we begin to realize that our inner peace is not a possession that we keep for ourselves. It is a gift that can be shared with others. This does not mean that we need to actively teach or preach, but rather that we allow our actions and attitudes to radiate peace. Just as a candle can light many others without losing its own flame, our inner peace can spread to others simply by being who we are. Through simple acts of kindness, listening, or offering a gentle presence, we can help others feel safe, understood, and at peace. The Buddha's last words before he passed away were, "Be a lamp unto yourselves." This powerful teaching emphasizes the importance of self-reliance in the pursuit of wisdom and peace. However, it also underscores the idea that once we have attained peace and wisdom, it is our responsibility to share that light with others. In the same way that a lamp illuminates the darkness, our wisdom can help dispel ignorance and suffering, bringing clarity and peace to those around us. In conclusion, the legacy of inner peace is one of shared wisdom, compassion, and love. As we walk the path of Buddhism and cultivate inner peace, we must remember that this peace is not ours to keep, it is meant to be shared. The true fulfillment in life comes from using our own wisdom and peace to help others, creating a ripple effect that spreads across the world. Through kindness, compassion, and selfless service, we can make the world a brighter and more peaceful place for all beings. The teachings of the Buddha remind us that the ultimate goal of our spiritual practice is not only to attain personal liberation, but also to help others find their own path to peace, joy, and enlightenment. As this journey comes to an end, what truly matters is not how much knowledge we've gained, but how ready we are to bring these values into our lives. Inner peace is not a destination. It's a path, a way to meet challenges with compassion, live fully in the present, and share tranquility with those around us. If each of us can take even a small step along this journey, the world will become a more beautiful and harmonious place. Ultimately, true happiness doesn't lie in what we possess, but in how we feel and how we share love and understanding with all beings.